Oh, there we go. Got to make sure my mic is on. Welcome to Modern Day Debate, everybody. Tonight we're debating, is Christianity true? To kick us off, we have Trey. So the floor is all yours. And thanks for being here, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful, Brian, for your giving me the opportunity to participate tonight. Thankful for Modern Day Debate and providing an open forum for discussing ideas, and the stuff that we talk about like tonight is of significance. And I'm hoping that maybe we can get some enlightenment, if not for us as debaters, then at least for the audience. I'm also thankful for you, Matt. Thank you for taking the time to engage. And it's always a delight to speak with someone to challenge my ideas and hopefully get a little better with my perspective, or maybe have some part of my perspective that I need to change. I am obviously the topic for tonight is Christianity true? And obviously I have the affirmative, so I bear the burden. So Matt doesn't have too much to do today other than to find holes with my perspective, but I'm very happy to take the affirmative and give a positive case for my perspective. But before I get into my argument, I'd like to delineate my approach or distinguish it from other apologetic methodologies that are extant today in our contemporary culture. Generally today, what we've got is usually three main schools of Christian apologetics. We've got evidentialism, presuppositionalism, and classicism. And evidentialism is an approach that is empirical in nature, and it's one that is dealing with probability rather than certainty. And usually what the apologist will do, who is going from the evidential approach, they'll usually take somewhat of a cumulative case for their perspective, and they will maybe begin with the archaeology, saying the reliability of the Bible, and then move through predictive prophecy, and oftentimes end up with like the resurrection for Christ. And they say, given all this information, it's more likely than not that Christianity is true. But they can't really make any strong assertions. And that's, from my perspective, I think it's a fine approach as far as it goes, but it's not strong enough for me. And then you've got the second approach, which is called presuppositionalism. And rather than being empirical in nature, they are analytical or rational in their argumentation. And in their argument, they're seeking certainty rather than probability. And what they oftentimes will employ is the transcendental argument for God, which is, it was Immanuel Kant in the 18th century who originally came up with that terminology. And basically what it says is that there must be a God who is rational, reasonable, personable, for there to be such a thing as logic or morals or telos. And the problem with this perspective is that it requires you to begin with their conclusion that the God of Christianity exists. And anytime you have your conclusion in one of your premises of your argument, you have committed the informal fallacy called the petitio principii fallacy. And that's what they do. And what presuppositionalists do is they confuse the order of being with the order of knowing, or the ordo ascendi with the ordo cognoscendi, and they either kind of lump them together or don't make distinguishing those two characteristics. And it ends up, they may think they're doing something clever, but they're really not. And I think it's more or less kind of a useless approach. It's just a 20th century innovation that for somehow 2,000 years the church missed out on it, which usually when somebody says something like that, you want to start asking questions. And then the third approach is my approach, which is classicism. And it too, like presuppositionalism, is an analytical approach in trying to make a rational argument that is seeking certainty with the argumentation. But my perspective does not commit an informal fallacy in doing that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct my argument in three parts. And as we all know, the specific message for salvation for humanity is delineated in the special revelation of the Christian scriptures, which is the Bible. But before you can have a word of God, you must first have the God of the word. And so I will begin my defense of the existence of God with an argument from contingency. And then I will proceed to an argument for moral law, which is an argument for teleology or for purpose. And these two arguments correspond with Romans 1 and Romans 2. And these are generally categorized under the rubric of philosophy and not theology, because this is information that is available to everyone, and this information is analytically true. And so once we have established that there is a God of the Word, then we can move on to the specifics of the Christian faith. And before I jump into exactly what I'm going to talk about in my third portion, I want to talk about the difference between evidence and proof. Evidence is empirical. It employs our sense perception, and it can only, as I stated, yield probability because our senses are prone to error. This is why science is always changing. We have misperceptions about the reality of the world in which we have, and we have to change it. So evidence is, again, only going to give us probability. But proof is analytical in nature, and it gives us certainty. And so if the premises of an argument for inquiry are granted, the conclusion necessarily follows logically. In other words, it cannot be refuted, but you got to agree though on the terms that you're making in your argument. For example, the famous syllogism is always all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. And you got to agree that men are mortal and that Socrates is a man. And if you grant those two ideas and have an agreement on the idea, then it necessarily follows that Socrates is mortal. Some other analytical proofs are like mathematical proofs of 2 + 2 = 4, or a bachelor is an unmarried man, or a triangle has 3 sides. The subject and a predicate are just restatements of the same thing, and there's nothing new added to the statement. For example, you say the dog has a tail. You're adding tailness to the subject, the dog. That would not be an analytical statement. That would be a synthetic statement. Okay, so the first two arguments that I'm going to give are analytical. And you may hear some complaining or some whining, maybe not, or a desperate attempt to change the subject from the other side of the aisle from me. Or I've been accused of putting words or ideas in my opponent's mouth that they are not saying. But all I'm doing basically is I'm pointing out the problems with the retort that my opponent is trying to give. But one thing that you won't hear, in my opinion, I believe I've been doing this 10 years. Not only have I not seen a defeat of the argument, I've not seen a valid rebuttal. Now, it may be that Mr. Dillahunty is the great savior of the atheist community and the great hope, and he will deliver that rebuttal, but I've not seen it yet. Okay, so the third portion of my argument will focus on the specifics of the Christian faith. And these are going to be evidences and not proofs. So we're not going to have the same level of certainty as the first two arguments because they are based on empirical data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin with the general reliability of the Bible as evidenced through the science of archaeology, and then focus on Christ's opinion of the Bible as being authoritative. And so with that, I'd like to just give a quick introductory statement as the first portion of my argument from contingency. And then Matt and I can interact with the data once he's finished. And but it goes like this. If something exists, there are only 4 possibilities. Either it is an illusion, or it is self-created, or it is self-existent, or it is created by something that is self-existent. And these are the only 4 possibilities to explain reality, and only one of them is viable. And we'll flesh this out in our cross-examiner in our discussion time when Matt finishes his opening statement. So with that, I'd like to close out my opening statement by saying, let's get ready to rumble.
Trying to get us demonetized right off the bat. You know that's a bad one. That'll get us right in trouble. No, let's thank Trey for his 10-minute opening there. We're going to kick it over to Matt for his 10-minute opening. The floor is all yours.
So first, I guess, thanks, everybody. It's the first time I've heard an opening that was all preamble with nothing substantive at all. So Is Christianity true? I try to do a different take on this than I've done many of the other times in the past, and that is, if we're looking at the claims of Christianity, we need to figure out which elements or which doctrines we're going to claim are necessary. As in, if this is true, then Christianity should reasonably be considered true, and if this isn't true or we can't demonstrate it's true, then we can't warrant belief in Christianity. And the claims fall into two different types for me. One are biblical claims, where the source of the claim is the Bible. And then the other one is extra biblical claims, where the source of the claim comes from outside of the Bible. And this can either be from contemporary sources used in support of claims that originate from the Bible, or perhaps modern sources or events purported to specifically support the veracity of a particular Christian doctrine. Someone talking about their lived experience and what works they think God has done in their life, that sort of thing. The claims that also fall into a couple of categories. One would be mundane claims, place names, events that are not specifically tied to Christianity. So Jerusalem is a place, and the fact that it appears in the Bible and is referenced within Christian stories doesn't in any way lend any credence to affirming the truth of Christian doctrines. The next one is mixed claims, where you have some mundane fact for which a principle of Christianity is used as the explanation for that fact. So the existence of reality, that would be a mixed fact where we would both agree, I would hope, that reality exists. But the Christian believes that Christianity serves as the true explanation for why reality exists. And then the third one is something that is Christian specific. These are the core doctrines. People might look at Genesis 1 and say, oh, well, that's, metaphor. It's not meant to be taken literally. And some other Christian might think that it is meant to be taken literally. But the Christian specific doctrines are things like sin, redemption, substitutionary atonement. To say that these things are true are fundamentally tied to the truth of Christianity. And I don't see how Christianity could be true if those concepts are not true. Now, we can set aside the mundane claims, the mundane facts, as they aren't tied to the truth of Christianity. Only the Christian-specific claims and the Christian explanations for mundane facts need to be evaluated in order to show that Christianity is true. Generally, you'd want to make a list of all of them, and you'd have to prove all of them to be true, or demonstrate all of them to be true. I don't want to nitpick on proof versus demonstration. But we don't have time for that, as is evidenced by the fact that we haven't even defined what tenets of Christianity we should care about in the opening. When we talk about whether or not something's true, luckily Trey and I both agreed that truth is that which comports with reality. And so for me, I'm going to borrow something from my friend Aaron Ra, 3 different phrasings where a claim, we'll just say claim X. X is either evidently true, or X is not evidently true, or X is evidently not true. The difference being X is evidently true means it's demonstrably consistent with the facts of reality and consistent with all of the relevant facts to that subject, or perhaps the overwhelming majority of relevant facts, because obviously we're not going to get things perfect. And then when you say X is not evidently true, that means it isn't necessarily disproved by the evidence, but it simply doesn't have the quality or quantity of evidence that would warrant calling it evidently true. And the final category, where X is evidently not true, that is when the claim is inconsistent with the facts of reality such that we can say that it's not true, or if you prefer, false. Now, if the roles were reversed here, as Trey already pointed out, he's got the burden of proof tonight. So he needs to demonstrate that Christianity is evidently true. And all I need to do is point out where it's not evidently true or evidently not true. For each part of Christianity that he chooses to defend tonight, he must show how it fits into the category of being evidently true. If you go through the Bible, which is the primary source of most everything about Christianity, starting at the very beginning, it gets the order of creation events wrong. Well, maybe that's literal, maybe it's not. Maybe science is wrong, but at least the order of creation events are inconsistent with the facts of science. It gets the origins of humans wrong, the origin of language wrong, the origin of animals wrong. These are inconsistent with the facts of reality and are evidently not true. The same is true for a global flood happening while humans existed. The same is true for the sun standing still in the sky. There's not evidence to support those things. The same is true for giant humans living alongside regular-sized humans, the plagues of Egypt. Miracles as a category, by definition, are not consistent with scientific observation, and thus they can't be evidently true. They may be true in the sense of internal consistency, but the supernatural, we are stuck where there's no way for us to investigate or confirm the supernatural. And so until there's somebody provides a method where if you, until somebody presents a method by which you can interact with, investigate, and confirm the existence of the supernatural and supernatural's interaction with manifestations in reality, then nothing that is proposed to be supernatural in origin can be confirmed to be evidently true. And they're just, at best, not evidently true. Falsifiability is the critical distinction there. Now, Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:17 says, "And if Christ be not raised, your faith is in vain. You are still in your sins." That's an incredibly important verse, at least it was for me when I was a Southern Baptist, that the notion of Christianity, there are plenty of things that we could argue about if I were to put my Christian hat back on about, origins and what's literal and what's not. But when it comes to the core, this is about man's fall from God's perfect ideal, the concept of sin, and the process of substitutionary atonement that results in Jesus dying and being resurrected. And that's why in Corinthians, Paul says that if Christ be not raised, then your faith is in vain. But Paul already betrays a flaw in his reasoning in that exact verse, because he says, if Christ be not raised, you are still in your sins. But that means that Paul is buying into a concept of sin and atonement that if Jesus isn't raised would also not be true, which means that you're not actually still in your sins. Paul's not ready to give up the entire concept of sin and fall from grace. Just maybe Jesus wasn't the Messiah is essentially what he's saying, which means he's buying into a notion that there should be a Messiah, that there should be a Christ. Nothing about the life of Jesus is evidently true, and we can, or nothing specific to the doctrines of Christianity, and we can at best grant the mundane part that, somebody existed if we want to. Mythicists don't. I'm not going down that road tonight. But the manger story, the star guiding wise men, those are not evidently true. And while the census of Quirinius may or may not have happened, the notion that it happened in a way where it required people to travel back to their place of origins is not only not evidently true, but it's evidently not true. Miracles are unverifiable, untestable, unfalsifiable. People don't like it when I say that. In Matthew 27, verses 51 to 53, it talks about the dead rising up and marching on, the dead saints marching on Jerusalem. I like to call it the zombie march on Jerusalem, with darkness shrouding the arena, the area, the tearing of the temple veil. None of that is evidently true. The doctrines of sin, redemption, substitutionary atonement have not been demonstrated. I don't even know how you could, which is why it seems that nobody even bothers to try. We just assume that that's the case. So where is God? A God that can do reportedly anything that is possible could easily demonstrate that these claims are evidently true, but he hasn't even bothered to attempt to do that, which is why we have debates over and over and over with people just asserting that because the story was believed in popular, that they have good reasons to think it's true, or, well, which is also true, by the way, for Islam and other religions as well, and is fallacious. Trey's already pointed out the problems related to an evidentialist approach and a presuppositionalist approach, and is going for a more classicist approach. But which portions of Christianity fit into the first category where those portions of Christianity are evidently true? That's the only thing that matters tonight, not distinctions between analytic and synthetic truths. Children are real. Wardrobes are real. Children will play hide and seek and may hide in a wardrobe, but that doesn't mean there's a passageway to Narnia. And if you did find yourself traveling through a wardrobe to another land, and there were trees in Narnia and snow and beavers, those are all real things, but beavers don't talk the way they supposedly do in Narnia. The existence of those things doesn't mean that magical versions of them are plausible. So if you walk through the wardrobe and land in a strange world, that doesn't mean that every story about that world is true. On the resurrection, the empty tomb is the most common phrase that you'll hear when people try to present evidence. And the existence of an empty tomb is irrelevant. I could show you an empty box, but that doesn't mean it used to have a body in it. It doesn't mean that If I had a body, it doesn't mean it was the specific body we're talking about. Each individual fact of this story needs to be confirmed, because even if you were able to show that Jesus existed, died, and eventually there was an empty tomb, that doesn't tell us how or why that tomb became empty. And yet, because they don't have anything substantive to go on, you're going to hear arguments from definitions and arguments from intuitions, arguments from contingency, evidently, as well. But Christians don't even have a case to bring on the resurrection, which is the most critical element, the one that Paul said, if Christ be not raised, then our faith is in vain. And while I can't show that Christianity is evidently not true on all points, we can show that for all of the non-mundane Christian-specific claims, they are either not evidently true or evidently not true, and virtually none of the doctrinal claims have ever even been attempted to be demonstrated as evidently true. Instead, we want to infer a God and then assert that it's this particular God. In that situation, for any religion other than Christianity, any sensible Christian would declare those claims as not true. If your book makes claims that are evidently not true and other claims that are not evidently true, why would you have any confidence in untestable, unverifiable, additional claims being true? After all, even if every mundane fact were true, that wouldn't make the other ones become true as well. Christianity is either not evidently true or evidently not true. But I've heard nothing at all so far, and we'll see if we hear anything better that would demonstrate the truth of Christianity, which is the only thing that matters tonight. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you to both of our speakers, Matt, for your opening statement there. We're going to kick it into an open discussion format. Just want to remind everybody, if you're hanging around in the live chat, to hit the like button. That helps us out a lot in the algorithm. And we're also going to be doing a Q&A at the end of this. So remember to be your nice and friendly selves when you're asking the questions. Keep it pointed to the debate and the arguments, not the speakers, and they'll be read. So we'll usually kick it to the other side to start out the open discussion. So Trey, we'll kick it over to you.
Okay, thank you for that opening, Matt. Your entire opening remarks were oriented toward evidentialism, and I'm not an evidentialist. But before we begin our inquiry, though, would you grant me two instrumental presuppositions for inquiry as we begin our time back and forth, namely the law of non-contradiction and the basic reliability of sense perception?
So you're asking me to grant the law of non-contradiction, sure, and the basic reliability of sense perception. I don't know how much of that I can grant, because
just basic. I know that our senses we have no connection to the world without our senses. You agree with that?
So I was trying to explain that the word basic carries with it some baggage in philosophy. And so I wanted to make sure that what I was conceding to begin with, if you're just mean without any deep philosophical context about properly basic, that generally we are forced to rely on our senses. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody's ever given me trouble with that, but I got to get those at the beginning because of kind of the groundwork. We got to have those instruments for inquiry. Okay. So, as I stated in my opening comment, I start with the existence of God because you've got to have a God before you have a word of God, and you, therefore, thereby being an atheist, do not believe in God. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Sure.
Okay. So if something exists, say for me, and to get as simple as possible, I can do this argument even with solipsism. I could say I'm the only thing that exists or whatever. But let's just say if something exists, me, the inquirer, okay? There are only four possibilities. Either all that exists is an illusion, or it is self-created, or it is self-existent, or it is created by something that is self-existent. Now, we know that the first one is false because it says everything is an illusion. You're familiar with Descartes' cogito. Sure, go ahead, Matt.
Very. I'm glad you're bringing this up because this is the only thing, and I'm not trying to trash you by saying this, but this was the only thing that was close to substantive in the debate. Everything else was preamble. So when you say,
right.
And now you've said it twice. You've said if something exists, it's either an illusion, self-created, self-existent, or created by something that is self-existent. Those are the only four options. Okay?
Yes.
I exist. Which of those is true for me? Am I an illusion? Am I an illusion?
Well, that's what we're going through. We're if you don't mind, we'll
I
go through each one of those and suss them out between us. Is that okay?
I guess, but it seems to be a big waste of time because so first of all, I exist. So if something exists and I'll be the something, I'm not an illusion. I'm not self-created. I'm not self-existent. And there's no evidence that I was created by something that is self-existent.
Okay. So why are you not self-existent? All right. Self-creation. I mean, I'm sorry. An illusion, you got to have somebody asking the question. So you're not an illusion, right?
I don't know. I'm saying you list that there are only 4 possibilities. And
Right.
the first example that comes to mind is me. And I don't know which of those 4 applies to me or how you can tell. And
Well,
why there isn't another one.
Do you think that it's viable that you're an illusion?
I don't see how I could be.
Okay, so then that's not a viable option, right?
I don't know, but I'm just
What do you
saying.
mean you don't know? Are you asking a question?
Okay, I'm not.
Are you familiar with?
Holy crap! Can I finish my sentence? You just asked me the question 2 or 3 times now. Yes,
I'm familiar with
the.
Just 1 second.
I'm familiar with the cogito, which is contingent on the primacy of reason. But your thing says if something exists, so I'm the something, only 4 possibilities. It's an illusion. I don't know whether or not I'm an illusion. I don't think that I am. I don't see any good reason to think that I am, and it may in fact be impossible. I don't think that I'm self-created. I don't think that I'm self-existent. And so that leads to number 4, which is created by something that is self-existent. But I pick up a rock. I don't think the rock's illusion. I don't think the rock is self-created. I don't mean Dwayne Johnson. I mean a pebble. I don't think it's self-existent. And I don't think the rock is created by something that is self-existent. So I reject your assertion that there are only 4 options, that you have exhaustively cataloged the options to explain something's existence. That's the point I was getting to.
Okay. Well, you won't even allow me to walk through each one of these. You keep saying I'm interrupting you.
No, sir. No, sir. I'm okay. When you accuse people in the opening of potentially whining and then being accused of putting words in the mouth, I'm just trying to get clarity. I'm not the moderator here. It's not, I won't allow you. I had a specific question about this and I wanted to get clarity on what we were talking about.
And I'm trying to answer
it's your
Hold on a
time.
second.
It's your time. You can continue, but you don't have to whine that I'm not letting you do something. I'm trying to get clarity here.
All right, go ahead there, Trey. Sorry about that.
Okay. So if we could continue on. So everything cannot be an illusion because otherwise there would be no person asking the question, right? Do you agree with that, Matt?
I don't know.
You just said you don't think that you are an illusion.
I don't think
Why?
so.
Why?
I don't have any reason to respond to you on this. So you just switched context, by the way, because the first 3 times you said this, it was if something exists, and now it's everything.
Well, no, if anything exists, and I said you, the inquirer.
Okay.
Are you an illusion? And if not, why?
I don't know.
Why?
Why is that
Why
not
do
a
you
good
doubt
enough
it?
answer? Why is saying I don't know not an acceptable answer for you? Is it because it doesn't lead down the script you want?
Well, no, you said that you don't think you are.
I am not convinced that I am an illusion. I'm also not convinced that I'm not an illusion.
Okay. Why would you think that you are not an illusion?
I think
You don't even want to go there, do you?
sorry. I think.
Wait, no. Don't you dare do this. You don't want to go there. I just pointed out I am neither convinced that I am an illusion and or that I'm not an illusion. You haven't done enough here to describe what an illusion is, how it's possible for me to evaluate this.
Okay.
All I'm saying is I don't know. And if that's not good enough for you, tough. You didn't bring enough ball game.
Okay. Well, you're ducking out before we even begin.
I
don't know. It's not a rebuttal.
I'm not ducking out, sir. I gave you the honest answer. I'm sorry it doesn't fit with your format.
Well, yeah, my format of reasonable inquiry to reality.
Are you an illusion?
No, I'm not, because I'm asking the question.
How do you know? How do you know?
Because if I think, therefore I am. That's what the cogito
but I think, therefore I am, as I pointed out to you, as Hobbes pointed out, is contingent on the primacy of reason, which we can't demonstrate.
I asked you for a reason at the beginning. You said yes.
No, sir. You
The law
asked
of
me. You asked
non-contradiction.
me to concede the law of non-contradiction, but that is not the sum total of reason or identity or a non or excluded middle.
Okay, well,
I'm saying
you deny
I
the
accept,
excluded middle and
no,
allow the
sir,
identity?
I don't. I accept all of those things as I've talked about for years.
Okay,
All right,
then
if you wanted to continue on with other examples that you brought up there, Trey, like I said last time, it's expected that the other person's probably not going to agree with you on certain points, but for the sake of the audience, if you want to present your argument and have that back and forth, I don't think we're going to get much further with the "Are you an illusion?"
Yeah, because Matt doesn't want to go there. He doesn't even want to engage the argument. This is the worst I've ever seen.
Let's try to move on to your next
Wow,
point there, Trey,
I'm the worst you've ever seen. How
You
well
won't
do you
even
think
engage
this?
the argument.
How well do
All
you think
just say
this
is,
is going
"I
to
don't
go,
know."
Trey? If you keep pointing out that someone who's honestly answering your question and saying "I don't know" because you haven't answered enough details to give them something, how do you think that's going to go for you?
You didn't say "I don't know." You said "I don't think that I am," and I asked you why, and you won't answer.
I don't think that I'm an illusion because I am not convinced that I'm an illusion. That doesn't
Why?
mean that I can
And
articulate.
I'm asking why, not just because you say so.
Would you let me finish as I was in the middle of saying before you jumped in, that doesn't mean that I can articulate to you why I don't think. I'm not convinced of something. Not being in the state of not being convinced of something does not have a burden of proof.
No, you don't have to have a proof for anything, but if you want to be reasonable,
then why do you
keep
keep asking me? Then why would you keep asking me why I'm not convinced? I'm not convinced. There's no burden of proof. There may not be a why. The reason I'm not convinced is because you haven't convinced me that I'm an illusion, and neither has anybody else.
It's just a blind faith statement for you then.
It's not. Wow. I'm sorry that you don't seem to grasp this, even though you pretended like you did during your opening. When I say I'm not convinced, that is not a faith position because I'm not asserting X is true. I'm saying I'm not convinced of something. If you think that there's good reason to be convinced that I'm an illusion, you can present that case. I have not been presented with I have not been presented with an evidence-based case to show why I should believe that I'm an illusion.
Okay. If there is a doubter, then would it be fair to say that there is everything cannot be an illusion?
If there is a doubter, would it be fair to say that everything?
Because the doubter has to think. In order to think, you've got to be.
See, we've switched from whether or not I'm illusion to whether or not everything is illusion.
No, anything. We can take you or whatever. Anything essential. If someone was to say everything is an illusion, then I ask them, who is asking the question then?
I'm not saying everything is an illusion at all. I'm answering your question about whether or not I'm convinced that I'm an illusion. I'm not convinced I'm an illusion.
You're not convinced that you're an illusion.
Correct.
So if you do not want to affirm your own existence.
I am convinced that I exist.
So you're not an illusion.
I don't know whether or not existence and illusion are mutually exclusive in this context. All I'm saying is I'm not convinced that I am an illusion. I don't know why this is such a big deal or why it's so difficult, other than it's not what your script's ready for.
Okay, well, if something is an illusion, what I'm saying is that it's not real. Do you think that you are real?
Well, here's the problem. Your position is if something exists, there are 4 possible criteria. And the first one is it's an illusion. And now you're saying what is an illusion is not real. Well, if something isn't real, then it doesn't exist. So already your argument, if something exists, has item number 1 being it doesn't exist is one of the options.
It's not real, is what I'm saying. Some people say everything is not real. And I say, well, it must be real if it's questioning its own existence.
What is real that doesn't, or what exists that is not real?
Well, someone might say it's like a dream or illusion or something that's not capable of. It's not. I'm not saying it's not nothing, because it's impossible to conceive of nothing. Because the idea of nothing is something. So how about this? How about
I don't see how that's relevant. Your position here is if something exists, there are 4 possible reasons. Number 1 is it's an illusion. Well, you just defined it's an illusion as not real. And so that means that your first thing is if something exists, one possibility is it's not real. To me,
essentially, and that's why I say it's not viable.
To me, if something's not real, it doesn't exist.
Right. So you would affirm that you exist.
Are you in agreement, just out of curiosity, that if something is not real, it does not exist?
If something is not real, it does not exist. Yes, if it doesn't have ontology, it's not.
So your statement, if something exists, one possible explanation is that it's an illusion, but you defined illusion as something's not real, which you've also now agreed does not exist. So what you have is, if something exists, one possibility is it does not exist. That's a logically flawed statement.
Well, I would say it is ethereal and not. Look, forget it. Let's just say you agree that
now who doesn't want to play? I point out a logical fallacy in your assertion of 4 possibilities, and now you don't want to play. Okay, move on.
I do want to play. We'll stay on the illusion. That's fine.
Well, if we can make sure that we're tying this back into the debate topic, is Christianity true? And just remind our audience how you're tying this into the debate topic, if you don't mind.
Well, as I stated in my opening statement, that if there is a word of God, first you got to have a God in order to give a word, right? So you got to begin with the existence of God before you can say that he somehow spoke.
Well,
and the argument that I'm giving is an analytical argument. It's not something that's evidential by nature. It necessarily follows. Contingent being cannot exist non-contingently. Would you agree with that, Matt?
A contingent being cannot exist non-contingently. Non-contingently, sure.
Are you contingent?
I don't know. I appear to be.
Okay. Do you need something in order to exist, like food, air, water?
That is apparent.
Okay. What does it mean to be self-existent?
I don't know.
It means to not need anything else. It means that you don't change. Anything that changes is contingent upon whatever that is actual outside of itself that brought it to its new state of existence. Okay. So anything that changes cannot be self-existent. That's the third option there. So we know you're not self-existent, and you know you're not self-created because you have to be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. So the first 3 are not viable options logically, and the only one left is a 4th, unless you can come up with a 5th.
No. That's not the way this works. See, just because you listed 4, it's not somebody else to come up with 5th.
Because I said that's all there are. Then you concede the argument.
Well, congratulations. If you say that's all there are, that must be all there is.
Give me another one.
A winning argument.
No,
sir.
Matt,
no, sir. That's
your
not
job
the way
is to
this
come
works.
up with a rebuttal.
No, sir. That's not the way this works. You don't just get to assert, here's the 4 options, and then when I ask you questions about them and expose that they don't make sense as the only 4 options, you don't get to say that you're right until I come up with a 5th option.
Okay, so then you think that there are other options in those 4, or those 4 are not valid. Give me an alternative.
No, I just explained to you that that's not how this works. I asked you at the beginning when you started on this track. This was the only thing in your opening, and I tried to have this discussion at the beginning, which is, if something exists, you say there are 4 possible explanations for it. Your first one is that it doesn't exist.
No, that's an illusion.
And illusions aren't real. And what is not
illusion
real
is like ethereal.
Illusion is not real by your definition, and what is not real does not exist by your admission. So your first candidate of an explanation for if something exists is that it doesn't exist. Then you went to, it's either self-created, self-existent, or created by something that is self-existent. Well, the 4th one could be created by something else that was created by something else that was created by something else that was created by something else, eventually, ultimately getting to non-contingent. But you skip past all that, which is the discussion that I wanted to have at the start. And now you're going to say, what's the 5th option? Okay, well, the 5th option is created by something else. And then that is created by something else.
All you're doing is adding complexity to the argument.
I'm sorry?
You're answering nothing, Matt. You're just adding complexity to the argument. Are you familiar with parsimony?
Yes, I'm well familiar with
You're
parsimony,
unnecessarily
Occam's
adding
razor, and all
complexity to
this.
the argument.
You can babble all you want, but your argument is logically flawed and has absolutely nothing to
Where
do
is the logical flaw?
with, is Christianity true? You haven't even hardly talked about Christianity at all. And I already demonstrated the logical flaw in your first potential explanation, that if something exists, one candidate is that it's an illusion, which is not real, which doesn't exist. So you're saying if something exists, one possible candidate is that it doesn't exist.
I will direct the audience to my opening remarks and what I said would happen. Exactly what's happening.
Your opening remarks were vapid and did not touch on the subject of, is Christianity true? And the one part of it that was even substantive to begin to discuss, I've already pointed out a logical flaw, a problem with your 4th potential premise, or fourth potential explanation. And none of this gets us anywhere near to, is there a God? Is it the God of Christianity? And is Christianity true?
I said he's going to want to change the subject. He's going to hand wave. And
I didn't want to change the subject.
Haven't called me a name yet.
I'm the only one, jackass, that talked about
there it is.
Christianity.
There it is. We got it.
Well, to be
No.
fair, yeah, we aren't really touching on the is Christianity true. I don't think.
Well, yes, we are.
Sir. I'm the only one who, in my opening remarks, talked about Christianity in any way, about establishing claims about Christianity and whether or not it's true. You didn't do any of that in your opening at all.
You haven't refuted any of the four possibilities.
There's nothing to refute.
Right.
You're full of shit. I did just refute option one.
No.
You refuted it. You're self-refuting.
No, an illusion is something that you're saying is just it's something that maybe like a dream in somebody else's mind or something like that.
No,
it's not a viable option. I'll agree with that.
No, that's your tap dance post hoc on illusion. When I asked you what illusion was and whether or not it's real, you acknowledge illusions aren't real and that what isn't real doesn't exist. I'm sorry that you walked into an obvious contradiction in the very first part of your argument, but you did.
You are trying
Just
so
hold on
hard.
a second there. So, yeah, I was going to say, if we can, like I said earlier, I don't want to pick on you there, Trey, just because, you are on the burden tonight. If we can tie this back into how that confirms Christianity or the Bible or Scripture, I'm not against any of the points you're trying to bring up here. Just if we can, like I said, tie this into how this relates to that specifically, I think that would be helpful.
Ryan, do you agree that there must be a God in order for him to give word of revelation?
I'm not here to agree or disagree with anybody. So
okay, well then you need to just let Matt go ahead and try to dig himself out of this hole.
I'm not in a hole, sir. You have the burden of proof, as you acknowledged.
I do.
To demonstrate,
and I'm making an assertion, and you're not
demonstrate the truth of Christianity. Please do.
Okay, so you agree that the only viable option is it was created by something that is self-existent?
No, I don't agree.
Why?
Because you haven't made the case for it, and your argument is flawed.
Okay, where was my logic flawed?
I already demonstrated where your argument was flawed. Yes, I did. In premise one, it can't be an illusion as an option. And the fifth one that you don't want to acknowledge is that it was created by something that that is still contingent. I exist. This is why I asked you at the beginning. I exist. I don't think, what's that?
The filibuster of words.
There's no filibuster here. I asked you at the beginning. I spotted the flaw in your argument from the beginning, which is why I asked here. This is a rubber band. I don't believe it's an illusion. Do you?
I do not.
I don't believe this rubber band is self-created. Do you?
No, I don't.
I don't believe this rubber band is self-existent. Do you?
If you can bend it, no.
I do believe that this rubber band was created, but I don't think it was created by something that is self-existent. Do you?
No, it's called an artifact.
Do you think this was created by something that is?
It was created by a human.
This was created
that is not self-existent.
So it was not. It was created by something that is not self-existent, right?
It is created secondarily by something that is not self-existent. Yes.
Not secondarily. A human isn't.
It's an artifact. Do you know what an artifact is, Matt?
Why is it that you won't answer this question?
I did answer it.
Okay, there are four possibilities by your definition. Here's a rubber band. It is either an illusion, self-created, self-existent, or created by something that is self-existent. Which of those four explain this rubber band?
Do you know what an artifact is? You don't.
Which of those four in your argument explain this rubber band?
The human that made it is made by something that's self-existent.
No, sir.
It's an artifact.
No, sir.
What?
Is the creator of this rubber band self-existent?
No, it was the creator was made by something.
Then you are ignoring your the only four criteria that you've given, and you are opting for a fifth option. And your fifth option is not. Yes, you are. Your fifth option is that it is an artifact of something that was created by something that is self-existent.
Right.
But
how does that?
That's a fifth option.
That's not a problem.
That is a fifth option.
All you're doing is adding complexity. That's fine.
It's the fifth option. I'm sorry that
Matt,
you can't. I'm sorry that you can't see this, but it's the fifth option.
Let me ask you this. So, do you agree that necessary being must exist in order for contingent being to exist? Let's go to the heart of it.
No.
Why?
Because I
contingent
haven't
being
been.
cannot exist non-contingently.
Why would you ask me why? And then the second I try to give you an answer, you just talk over and give your own answer. Why would you do that?
You are kind of a hothead.
And you're a jackass. What would you? What else would you like to do? I'm fine with this, because when you ask me, am I convinced of something? And I say no, you keep going, why not? I'm not the one with a burden here. I'm not convinced of it because I haven't become convinced of it.
Okay. Blind faith is not a debate, my friend.
I'm not presenting.
Give me reasons for
how
your
many
perspective.
times, I don't know how many times I have to explain this to you. Not being convinced of something is not a blind faith position. It is not being convinced. Just like I'm not convinced you know what the hell you're talking about. That's not a blind faith position.
Well, if you don't think I know what I'm talking about, then you should be able to demonstrate it, right?
I did. I demonstrated that there was at least a fifth option to your thing, and that the first one is self-refuted by you. And I did it with a rubber fucking band.
Oh, you're a genius. Yeah.
I am. Thanks, though. Now,
all right.
To answer the question more thoroughly, is that you are asking, do I think that that a contingent being has to be brought about by a necessary being? Right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. No, because I think a contingent being could be brought about by a contingent being, by something that's contingent. And there could be a chain of those. Whether or not that ultimately ends or begins in a necessary being, I don't know. I suspect it does. But I don't necessarily, but I don't suspect that it's necessarily a being. That's the problem.
Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's imagine a Venn circle of all the universe, of everything that exists. Okay.
The universe,
and if you want to say it's, pardon me?
The universe of the cosmos, because the universe is the local presentation of our space-time.
Cosmos. Okay, everything that exists.
I got you. I just want clarity.
That exists. All right.
Gotcha.
And all of those are, you're going to say turtles all the way down. They're all dependent.
No, I'm not. If you'd listened to me just a second ago, I said that I think it ends in something necessary. I'm just not convinced it's a being.
Oh, so you concede necessary being.
No, sir. Wow, it's like you hear only what you want to hear. As I've said now for the third time, I'm convinced that it ends in something necessary, but not a being.
What is what? How do you have some? What is is it nothing necessary? I don't understand what necessary means for you.
Non-contingent.
Does it have ontological status?
Non-contingent. That doesn't mean that I'm convinced that the thing that is non-contingent, if we get down to that point, is a being.
Okay, there's only two categories, Matt: being and non-being.
Yes.
It's a necessary non-being?
Because
non-being is nothing.
No, sir. Non-being, I mean, the word being here is agent.
Okay.
Not existence. It's either a non-contingent agent or a non-contingent non-agent, some natural physical.
So it has being. Are you investing the term being with personhood?
A being is an agent.
A being is no. A rock is not an agent.
A rock is not a being.
It does. A rock has ontological status. It really is something.
A rock has being. A rock is being. It is not a being.
It is something specific.
It is not.
And it has ontology.
Being. It is not a being. An entity. An agent. It has being in the sense of it is, but it is not. Personhood's not even the right word for it. When you say, is there a non-contingent being? The way I hear that, and the way people hear it, and the way it gets ended up getting used is there must be a non-contingent being, and that being, that personage, that agent is God. Now, if you want to just say there's a non-contingent thing that has being, then we're not quite as far apart. I just don't know how you get to that either. But I'm not. Okay. When you just flat out say, Matt, are you convinced that there's a non-contingent being? No, because I'm not convinced that whatever ultimately would be non-contingent is a being. Is that clear?
Whatever is non-contingent is but you agree that there must be some entity that is necessary in nature that gives rise to contingent being.
No. As I've said, I am convinced that there may be something non-contingent, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know that it is. It would not be surprising to me. But the problem is that all of this ties to causal chains and time, because it doesn't, I don't know what it means to exist outside of time or absent time. And so the furthest back that we can track is essentially to the Planck time at the beginning of our cosmos, or the beginning of our local presentation of the universe. And beyond that, I don't know how we can investigate. It seems analytically the case that a contingent thing and a series of things, this is the problem here, is that you're trying to, well, you're not trying to, let me retract that. You are identifying as not an evidentialist. And so you want to use analytic arguments, which have a problem that you didn't acknowledge when you knocked down the problems with the other ones, which is they are essentially attempts to define something into being, and they are not tying, yes, sir, they are not tying the subject to reality. They are, you can define whatever you want and evaluate it analytically, but that doesn't tell you what ties to reality. And we have no way of investigating reality prior to what we identify as the beginning of time at Big Bang cosmology's T0.
Okay,
but I still don't see what that has to do with Christianity being true.
Okay,
so,
would you agree that I forgot what I was going to say. Something with that last point that you said.
I really like for you. Oh, good. Wow.
We didn't get very far.
we didn't get anywhere. I mean, the whole point of is Christianity true is the religion of Christianity, the tenets of Christianity, are they demonstrably embodied in the facts of reality? And we didn't get to any of that. You didn't even list.
Does Christianity teach that there's a God? Isn't that the number one thing Christianity teaches?
Yes. Well, I don't know that it's necessarily the number one thing, but you can look at it as the number one thing. Yes.
What would be second to it?
The resurrection of Christ.
What would be better? What's that?
See, the thing is, Christianity.
Jesus had to be God.
Hang on. Oh my God. The point is that the existence of God is not exclusively tied to Christianity. It's tied to tons of different religions. And so if we're going to say, is Christianity true? We need the tenets of Christianity. And that is that Jesus was the substitutionary atonement for sin. It is the death and resurrection of Jesus. Whether or not he was divine or any of that, all of those things are up for debate and demonstration. But when you say the number one thing Christianity teaches is that there's a God, that's when I listed those categories of claims. That is one of those that is not exclusive to Christianity, that there is a God. Instead, you need to talk about a specific God. And yet you can't even, I mean, I know you're trying to get to there must be a God, and then I'm going to prove that it's the Christian God, and then I'm going to prove that it's Jesus. But it'd be really cool if you just list 3 things about Christianity that are exclusively.
Please just change the subject. That's all you're asking.
I'm not changing the subject. The subject of the debate is Christianity true? It'd be really fucking nice if you'd present anything at all about Christianity. I'm not changing the subject of the debate. I'm the only one that's talked about it. Though. I'm the only one that's talked about it. I'm the only one that quoted from the Bible. I'm the only one that talked about what Christianity is. I'm the only one that talked about how you would go about demonstrating the truth of it instead of trying to poop all over evidentialist and presuppositionalist and then throwing out one flawed argument at the end of it. This debate is about, is Christianity true? Are you going to do anything to defend is Christianity true, or did we waste our time?
Yeah, I tell you what, Ryan, why don't we go to Q&A? I don't think we're going to get anywhere here.
Cool. Maybe you'll answer some questions from them.
All right, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of launching off of discussion in the Q&A. Sorry to everybody who might get upset every once in a while. You're in the live chat saying, Ryan, you're on mute. I do that on purpose a lot of the time, sometimes not, but a lot of the time, just so that if I'm like 10 seconds and I got to mitigate time, that you're not hearing me a bunch in the podcast. And just a reminder, next to me, you will see that you might see these upcoming debates that are happening on Modern Day Debate. They've actually already happened. They're just a reminder that we are posting these on our podcast. So check those out. And we're going to move into Q&A now. So thanks to our speakers for being here. And let's get right into it. Adrian Radis, $4.99. Could you conceive of a world where humans exist without need of a God? What would that world look like? Why would it look like that?
Is that for me?
I think so, yes.
Okay. No, I cannot conceive of a universe where everything is dependent independently without violating the law of identity.
All right. We'll continue on from there. And thank you so much for that. That was actually the first super chat from Adrian. So thank you so much for that. Pointless Poppy, $4.99. Thank you again for being in the Q&A. Trey, if humans are prone to sin and lying is a sin, why isn't it likely that the followers of Jesus lied about his resurrection?
Why isn't it likely that they lied about his resurrection? I'm sorry, I don't really understand that.
They're saying that if humans are prone to lying, how did you determine that the people who claimed to have seen a risen Jesus didn't lie?
Because people are prone to lying doesn't mean they lie all the time, right?
No, but the question is, how do you tell when they're lying and when they're not?
Well, they were considered to be faithful followers of the Christian religion. Would that be a fair thing to say? And that liars will not inherit the kingdom of heaven.
Okay. Can you show that
humans do not have to lie?
Correct, but they can lie. And can you show that they inherited the kingdom of heaven or not?
Well, by the testimony of their lives, that they were gave a testimony of righteous people. Yeah.
You're saying that their testimony shows that they were righteous?
Yes, that they were upstanding people in the society in which they lived.
And so when they say that they saw a risen Jesus, that means it's more likely that they're telling the truth.
Yeah, but it's not Jesus. They just made this thing up. It came up out of nothing. There was prophecy that said that the Messiah would come, who would be born of a man, who would be born from Abraham, who would be born of David, who would suffer for their sins. There's a rich, very clear prophetic line that shows that Jesus Christ was the promised Messiah who the Jews were looking for, who would save the people from their sins. John the Baptist said to him when he first saw him, what? Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's continue on from there. Let me just pull these super chats back up. But yes, thank you for that, Pointless Poppy. Let's continue on. Pipple Punk, $5. And keep those super chats coming in, everybody, and we'll keep the conversation rolling. Trey, how do you justify lending more credence to the supernatural claims of Christianity than other religions?
Well, it'd be nice to be able to have a conversation, something like that. I mean, what other religion are you talking about? The only religion that makes any sense to me, that can answer the ultimate questions about metaphysics and about morality, is Christianity. None of the others, like Islam, for example. The God of Islam is a monad, and therefore he has no plurality of person. Therefore, he cannot have the attribute of love, because love requires a lover and a loved. And so therefore, the God of Islam, Allah, is dependent upon his creation in order to have the attribute of relationality. And therefore, he's not God, because he is dependent for something, and he's not self-existent. So that's just one example. Or if you have multipluralities of gods, that doesn't make sense, because an ultimate reality cannot have accidental properties, which are properties that it participates in. The ultimate reality must be one. Even the ancient Greeks came up with this without any Christian ideas. And so none of the religions that I've seen are able to answer the metaphysical questions and in a satisfactory way that would make me want to follow it.
Any thoughts on the other side, or we want to continue on?
No, I generally speaking, I don't see how that same objection doesn't apply to a God with regard to, or the Christian God with regard to love and needing it. As a matter of fact, that's been brought up many times.
Because God is three in person and one in essence.
Yeah,
there's relationality eternally.
Wow. Never mind, Trey. You do all the talking.
Well, we do want to try to mitigate the interruptions, but Yeah.
No, I interrupted.
I was gonna say it does sometimes put us in a hard position where it's kind of like, well, where do we pass it now? So, Trey, if you want to give your thoughts there, and then Matt, if you had some thoughts too, we'd love to hear them. I know it was a bit of a short debate, everybody, but I figured we might get into a little bit more meat with the Q&A. So let's continue on. So, Trey, did you have some more thoughts on that?
On what exactly?
Justifying lending more credence to the supernatural claims of Christianity than other religions. That was from Pibblepunk.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, give me the religion and give me the argument for it, and I'll consider it. I've just never seen anything that's even close to Christianity. Are there not many? Is there no super chats?
All right, yeah. Well, we can continue on then. Yeah, keep the super chats coming in, everybody. And we'll keep the conversation rolling. Rusty Colon. I love that. Isn't that just a nice name to say out loud? $10 Canadian. Trey, if you grant that there might be a creator God, how do you go from an uncaring being to a personal being and reconcile all other claims of religion, truth contrary to what you believe?
Okay, so it's something about uncaring. Is he asking a question of why there's such a thing as evil if there's a good God or something? I didn't really understand that question.
Well, I think it's a little similar to the last one where they're trying to say, why do you believe this one over the others? That's kind of the follow-up of the question there.
Okay, well,
but I think the part that we didn't get into, though, is how do you go from an uncaring being to a personal being and reconcile all other claims of religious truth?
Okay, well, let me say this. So to say that, and we never really got to this in the argument, but there's a principle called the principle of proportionate causality, and it's that something cannot cause in something else what it itself does not have. For example, I cannot communicate the attribute of flying like a bird to my children because I don't have that capacity. So if by way of modus ponens, if we see there's such a thing in this universe as empathy or value, then, like, for example, that I care about Matt and Ryan, then there must be something eternally that is a value or teleological, because unintentionality cannot intend intention. So if I care about stuff, then the thing that gave rise to me must have that attribute in order for it to pass on to me.
All right, any thoughts over there, or do you want to continue on? Yeah. All right, let's continue on, everybody. All right, so let's scroll on up here. Yeah, there's a bunch of them pouring in now, so we'll try to get through all these. Tag Hooah, $10. Matt, are you convinced that you're not convinced that you're not an illusion? No matter what you answer, you contradict yourself. Get it?
Am I convinced that I'm not convinced that I'm not an illusion?
Depends on how many times you say it.
Yes, I'm convinced that I'm not convinced that I'm not an illusion. And there's no contradiction in that, because when we're talking about things being subject to the primacy of reason, we can't justify that. But as long as we're going to accept reason,
right,
which I'm happy to grant identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle right off the bat, which is why it was so easy when he asked about non-contradiction. As soon as we do that, then everything else is predicated upon that, or derived from that. And so me being convinced is a matter of direct experience. And while the direct experience that I have of reality may not tie to the ultimate reality, are you in the matrix? I can't solve hard solipsism. Getting back to the cogito, I think therefore I am, even though that is contingent on the primacy of reason. Once we're stuck where everything is contingent on the primacy of reason, then via the same reasoning that results in cogito ergo sum, I am in fact convinced that I'm not convinced that I'm not an illusion.
All right. Well, we could always add another. Are you convinced to that? So yeah, that's a fun one. As far as the questions go, thanks for your first super chat. Tag Hooah. BVGS $5 says, if God is eternal and never changes, why isn't the universe eternal? Why did God's mind change to decide to bring about the universe? Chime in, Matt.
Oh, sure. Well, I can put my Christian hat back on, because something that is eternal doesn't have to create something that is eternal. There's no requirement that an eternal, perfect God necessarily creates something else that is eternal and perfect.
That's impossible.
Never mind, Trey. You answer all of them. Go ahead.
You are so thin-skinned.
You are such a whiny little bitch.
Oh my gosh.
Well, if you
Oh
could
my
wrap up, if you
gosh.
could wrap up your point there, Matt, we'll
I'm done.
continue on.
I'm done.
Okay.
Trey's not going to present anything on why Christianity is true. Why should I do any work?
All right, Trey. So same question. God is eternal and never changes. Why isn't the universe eternal? Why did God's mind change and decide to bring about the universe?
Well, yeah, I think maybe what he's saying is that is if the universe is not eternal and God created it, did he not change his mind and move to a new state of being in order to make the universe, which started in time and begins with time, or time is just the measurement of change in the way we understand it, of contingent being. And so the thing that you got to remember is that contingency cannot define necessity. So necessary being is not somehow contingent upon contingency by definition. So it's a logical necessity to say that God in his eternal state is not changing, because then he would not be ase if he didn't. But to say that his change necessarily represented a change in him is to say that contingency must rule over aseity, which is irrational. So I'd say there is a mystery in there, but it's not irrational. And you've got to, sometimes you got to embrace mystery rather than affirm that which is logically repulsive.
All right. Well, let's continue on. More super chats are coming in, and thank you so much for that first super chat there, ABVGS. Stay curious. Trey seems to know the 5 Ds of apologetic arguments: dodge, dive, dip, duck, and dodge. Well, thanks, Stay Curious, for your $5. You don't really have to respond to that if you don't want to, because it's not really a substance.
He got me. I'm nailed.
All right. Native Atheist, $10. Trey's arguments haven't approved any at all. Once again, you don't really have to respond to that.
Question?
I guess they're just, we like the fan.
They're just mad.
We like fan chats,
They have a right to be mad, by the way. I would argue that they absolutely have a right to be mad, because people gave time up to come here to discuss and watch two people discuss, is Christianity true? I took extensive notes on your opening, where as we're getting closer and closer to the 10 minutes, you started talking about the arguments that you were going to present. But the time to present your arguments in a debate is in the opening, not in the discussion. The discussion is for about discussing what you presented in the opening. And you didn't present those arguments in the opening. You spent your opening whining about
the argument.
No, sir, you didn't. You talked about evidentialism.
Did I give the four
you talked about presuppositionalism, and then you presented one part of a possible argument from contingency, but you didn't get to any of the rest of your argument for moral law or purpose in your opening. You didn't talk about how those corresponded with Romans 1 and 2. You didn't actually present anything tying to the specifics of Christianity or how you can tie that to truth. That was not your opening. Your opening was, I'm sorry?
I did tie it. We were talking about Christianity.
No, sir.
The whole time at a fundamental level.
At a fundamental level. Well, I'm sorry, but during your opening, the only thing that came close to an actual argument for the beginnings of Christianity was, if something exists, there are 4 possible explanations for it. It's an illusion, which is already the logically flawed one of your 4. It's self-created, it's self-existent, or it's created by something else that is self-existent. But that excluded another option, which is that it was created by something that was contingent. So you presented, and it took us all that time to finally get to a point where, with a rubber band, we demonstrated that the first part of your contingency argument, which is the only thing that you got to in your opening, in 10 minutes, supposed to be about Christianity, is true. I, on the other hand, did a 10-minute opening talking about the specifics of Christianity, gave examples of what isn't identifiably true, what is identifiably not true, and all of these things are tied to Christianity, right down to the resurrection, which is the most important thing about Christianity. They have a right to be mad. This was time wasted, sir.
The second possibility is irrational too, as well. Do you agree with that?
The
That's
second
my
possibility.
point. That's my point in giving the 4 points. Number 1 and 2 are irrational. Number 2 is empirically we know is false.
Sure. I have, wow. I can't believe we're getting back to this, but yes, I don't know under what circumstances.
Well, you brought it up.
Wow. I don't know under what circumstances something could be considered self-created. If in fact it existed forever in some form or another, but changed form for the local presentation of our universe.
That's not number 2.
Okay.
Hold on a second there, Trey. I don't want to put you on mute. So if you could just let Matt wrap up, and then, like I said,
done.
we'll definitely let you respond. All right. So yeah, if you want to respond to that, Trey, might have injected at the wrong point. No. All right. Well, we'll continue on, everybody.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, were you saying? I didn't know you were turned over to me.
Oh.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, sure.
No, I don't have anything to say. I'm just saying I didn't know I was being rude. It's kind of odd to me.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, so let's continue on here. Tag hooah, another $5. Matt, what's the ontological difference between an agent and a non-agent? Ontological as in real, non-subjective difference.
What I would say is that the difference between an agent and a non-agent is intentional action. That's the thing that makes something an actor. And an agent is typically used in philosophy to describe an actor, a thinking, like a leaf isn't an actor, a bug is. A bug has agency. So the ontological property is intentional action.
All right. We'll continue on there. Justin Johnson, thanks for becoming a member there. Or welcome to Extra Juicy. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's been juicy. T. Will, $5 Canadian. Oh, Canada. Trey, please explain what happens to the being of a rock if you break it into a bunch of pieces with a hammer, because you know it's a rock.
It becomes smaller.
All right. Any other?
That's weird because it's certainly divided into pieces that are smaller, but it doesn't become smaller.
Well, depends on what you're assigning as the rock. Which piece?
Well, if I break a rock in half, the rock is now in half, but everything that made up the rock didn't get smaller. It got divided.
It's not smaller?
Why? Did the matter change? Did the quantity of matter?
It's separated.
Separated does not mean the smaller. The two pieces are still the same as the whole. It's just dividing in half. If I cut a pie in half, the pie didn't get smaller. The two pieces. No, it didn't.
If I take a pie and I cut it in half,
you have two halves of a pie, which is equal to the whole. I'm sorry that math escapes you, but two halves equal the whole.
Okay. I guess I'm not understanding what he's asking.
All right. Well, let's continue on there. Thanks for your super chat there, T-Will. Angel Quells, $5. Matt, what was the deconstruction phase like when you came out of your belief in God?
Well, that's a long story that I've done a bunch of podcasts, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time on it, but I can tell you this. I was my family and everybody else thought that God wanted me to be a preacher. I was actively working to fulfill that goal after having denied it for a number of years. I thought that God had punished me. And I had a roommate who was an atheist. I wanted to find a way to convince him, because I didn't want to get to heaven and have God say, why is this man who you love like a brother burning in hell because you refuse to do what I've commanded you to do in 1 Peter 3:15. And so I set out to try to find a way to convince an atheist, and that backfired. The deconstruction process took, well, it's ongoing, I suppose, but the bulk of it was about a year and a half. It resulted in quite a few strained relationships. But it also resulted in everything about me and my life being better in the long run.
All right, let's continue on from there. I mean, it's a bit of a personal question, but thanks for answering that there. And we'll continue on. I see there's about 1,600 of you fellas hanging out in the live chat. Watching live. I don't know how many are actually in the live chat right now, but if you got a moment, if you got hands, if you're that type of being, hit the like button, guys. It helps out a lot. Let's continue on with our super chats before I make any more terrible dad jokes or other things that can't even be classified as jokes. All right. Lilith, $2. Thanks for the laughs. Nice, Matt. Well, I think that's a fan chat, so we'll take it. Thank you. We appreciate
It's wild
nice
because don't get me wrong. I've participated in chat, and there's plenty of people in chat who can't stand me, and then there's fanboys. And honestly, I wish there were no fans. It is ridiculous to come in and do a debate and have somebody be like, Matt won before it started. I don't tend to look at these things as win-lose. They're about trying to get to the truth of something, and I think everybody lost today.
All right, well, let's continue on. Keep those super chats coming in, everybody. We're having fun over here. Let's continue on. Scrolling again. Doug, first super chat. Thank you so much. Matt, could you grant the existence of Trey's generic God so he can continue to show all of us how Christianity is true?
If you wanted, so I actually just got offered to do a debate where they wanted me to grant this premise and that premise and all these other things to build up. If I granted, for the sake of argument, that a non-contingent agent that could be viewed as a God existed, all the work that we do after that would wind up being fairly useless. Because it'd be like saying, I'm going to grant that magic is real, and then all of a sudden you're going to start arguing for Harry Potter. Would I do it? Sure. I would say, as long as we were clear, for the sake of argument only, and perhaps for a reductio, I could grant that there was a generic agent, non-contingent agent that was a first cause, or that is the prime thing that everything else is contingent on. Yeah, I could grant that only for the sake of argument. The problem is that doing that here, when you already have people who are Trey lost, Matt lost, Trey's terrible, Matt's terrible, this is terrible, that's terrible. I don't see what the benefit is to conceding the most important point, because I'm not just a non-Christian, I'm an atheist. I'm not convinced that a God exists. And we've done Does God Exist over and over and over again. We've had these debates for ages. The apologists have different lines of attack so much that they don't even like each other. The evidentialists, the presuppositionalists. I agree with a good chunk of what Trey said about evidentialists and presuppositionalists. I'm sure that we would agree on a great deal of things about nature, but there's specific things in the phrasing, which is why I had to ask about basic, because properly basic is something different. And when you say that there is a being, that's different from X has being, like a rock has being, but it's not a being. And I wanted to make that clarity over agency. If you present something that isn't well defined and you need clarity, you got to dig in. But sure, if there had been, I can grant almost anything for the sake of argument. But when the thing that we're granting is the foundation of an entire worldview that is the subject of the argument, granting it seems like giving away the farm.
Which seems funny to me, then, why you were so intent on changing the subject to the later.
Because I don't want to give up the farm, and I didn't try to change the subject. The subject of this debate was, is Christianity true? Nobody watching this thinks we spent any significant time talking about Christianity or truth.
You are an angry person.
Right.
And you are dishonest.
Let's try to,
because I showed up to talk about, is Christianity true? And you did
And so
not.
did I.
No, sir, you didn't. You wasted your 10 minutes of opening,
good grief.
and then you wasted the time trying to nitpick over something where you have a flawed argument.
right,
nitpick
let's
over
carry
the
on.
thing you said is the most important.
No, sir.
Yeah, let's carry on because I do have a question here for
Okay.
you, Trey. And so Benjamin, $5. Does Trey understand the difference between I am not convinced X is true and I am convinced X is false?
Sure. Yeah, it's just that you don't see enough evidence to convince him. So all I want to ask is, I just want to know the reason why you're not convinced, so we can work through that. So I do understand that, though.
And as I explained, I don't necessarily, we haven't defined things well enough, and a case hasn't been presented to convince me of something. That's why I'm not convinced. You seem to, when you ask, why are you not convinced? Almost every time that you went down that road of asking me why I'm not convinced, you switched it to assert that I had a blind faith, which only applies if I had a position that I was convinced of. It doesn't take blind faith to not be convinced, because you and your ilk have not demonstrated sufficiently a position for me to accept. And that's not faith-based. I'd be happy to tell you why I'm not convinced once we have the discussion, to where I can figure out what it is that you're actually presenting, and I can articulate why I'm not convinced. But whether or not I'm convinced is irrelevant to, is Christianity true? I'm not the one avoiding the subject, sir.
Yes, you were, because if
You're a
you
liar.
do not hold to,
You're a liar. You're a
Next
liar.
question.
All
Okay,
right,
thank you.
And
Thank you.
everybody can see it.
Let's try to carry on to our next question there. And everybody, we'll keep the super chats coming in, keep them friendly. I try to read them before I pull them up, but sometimes I go back to the live chat and then I get back in here and then I end up reading some terrible things. Anyways, it's fine. Keep them friendly. Berserk, $5. How can an all-powerful God be bound by ego? Needing validation is a product of insecure ego. Therefore, not needing validation puts you above God.
Needing validation. I think he's assuming that God needs something. Christianity doesn't teach that.
All right. Any?
Well, so this I suppose could touch on this thing of him basically saying that Allah needs his creation, but
Right.
the God of Christianity doesn't need his creation.
Right.
I
Volition doesn't necessarily entail a need.
I don't know that either's been demonstrated or is the case at all. But I'm not sure that that's what can you read the question one more time?
Yeah, sure thing. So from Berserk for $5, how can an all-powerful God be bound by ego? Needing validation is a product of an insecure ego. Therefore, not needing validation puts you above God.
I'm already above God. And I don't need validation.
All right, well, we'll continue on. And I like validation. My wife is actually watching this live stream and let me know she likes my dad jokes. Love you, wife. All right. Charles,
it's nice to have people that love you.
Yes. As I say, and my old bandmate Josh is in the chat too. So I've got all kinds of love here tonight, which is wonderful. Love you, fellas. Charles Lehner, $9.99. Matt, given your understanding of the creation narrative, are you at all worried these young Earth-like hermeneutics had anything to do with your backslide?
Wait. Are they saying that I was a young earther?
Well, let me just see here. I know I stumbled on that one. So, given your understanding of the creation narrative, are you at all worried these young Earth-like hermeneutics had anything to do with your backslide? So basically, I think they're saying, like, did the creationists turn you off? I think is what they're asking.
Yeah, no. It's difficult for me to go back and talk about. I mean, let me rephrase this a little bit so that people aren't confused. I don't think I was ever a young Earth creationist. I'm not even completely sure that I was a biblical literalist, but I was really close to it. And so when you say, could that kind of young Earth like hermeneutics have been responsible for my backslide? So for me, backslide takes on a completely different meaning. I backslid lots of times. I mean, that was actually the primary method of raising, teaching Southern Baptist teenagers. You know, you go to summer camp, you go to church frequently. I was there all the time, but you'd be called out for not living the life you're supposed to live under Christ. So you were never going to be successful that way. And so you were constantly backslidden. You were, if you looked at somebody in lust, you're backslidden. If you did this, you're backslidden. So to me, backslidden takes a different term. If you just talk about, do I think young earth, like hermeneutics, led to my abandoning or giving up Christianity? No, because I studied all of it. I went through day age stuff, everything. The fact of the matter is the order of events listed in Genesis does not match what we know to be the order of events from science. And so then you're left with saying, okay, then Genesis 1 should be viewed as metaphor only. The problem is that when you turn original sin into metaphor, then you now have an issue of what is there to be saved from. And when you don't have a way to investigate the supernatural, you don't have any way of getting to what is there to be saved to. These are inferences that people make once they begin with, as Paul did, you are still in your sins. And when you actually begin to look at, do I have any reason to think that the concept of sin is a useful truth as it's described within Christendom? For me, it became very clear that it's not a useful truth, that is one aspect. It's one of the reasons why I listed it in my opening. When I listed aspects of Christianity that are in that specific category of Christian-specific doctrines that haven't been, and I don't think can be demonstrated: sin, redemption, substitutionary atonement, that stuff. That's why I couldn't believe it anymore, not because of a young earth thing.
Alrighty. We'll try to continue on from there. Thank you so much for your super chat there, Charles. The Kenneth for $20. He's got a twofer here, boys, so just watch out. Trey, is having an answer to meta whatever the same as having the right answer?
Having an answer to the meta whatever the same as having the right answer? You know what that was? You're talking about ultimate reality?
Yes, is having some answer to a question the same as having the right answer to the question?
No, but you do need to be reasonable, I guess. You can't be unreasonable in you're dealing with an issue. That's my problem.
Alrighty.
So, for example, your perspective as an atheist, Matt, is unreasonable, is untenable. Insofar as you say that all being is contingent. Now, I know you said necessary, but there's a lot of equivocation there. But I'm saying any atheist that thinks that all being is contingent is utterly irrational.
All right. Well, the other half of that question is for you.
And hang on, because if you're going to accuse me of being irrational, that's not my position. And I
okay. Well, that's what I'm saying. If you're
that's not my fuck it. I'm done.
Yeah, as I say, we have to try to mitigate the interruptions when Matt's.
I didn't even know I was interrupting. He is so thin-skinned.
Well, just
you are such a jackass. I'm sitting here trying to find a way to be decent and answer your question, and I get half a sentence out, and you immediately jump all over it, and you've done it like 10 times.
Well, I apologize. I'm not meaning to be obnoxious.
It is impossible. You're the one who's accusing me and all atheists of having an unreasonable position. Maybe you should have picked that debate and defended that. But when you assert that my position is that all being is contingent, that is not my position. And so every time I try to defend you and claim, hey, Trey does know the difference between X is not, or I'm not convinced of X and I'm convinced of not X, then you turn around and betray that you don't do that by asserting that it's a blind faith position or asserting positions that I don't have and haven't expressed as unreasonable. It is a dishonest debate tactic. It is a dishonest discussion tactic, and I'm tired of it.
I have no interest in that, Matt. There's no benefit to be cheating or to use underhanded tactics.
Well, let's get to the second part of your question here, the Kenneth, and we'll try to get our full thoughts out here. So, Matt, does Trey, and this is a little ad hominem, but I know that Trey can handle it. Matt, does Trey make you miss Psy? So I think they're saying, like, do you find this similar or is it worse?
No. So I'd rather have a conversation, believe it or not, I'd rather have a conversation with Trey than with Psy. And not for the reasons that a lot of people expect. My debate that I did with Cy Ten Bruggencate, it got a lot of views. It pointed out a lot of stuff. So I made a terrible logical argument. But the key is Cy's a presuppositionalist, and Trey isn't. And so there's no point in debating someone who is truly a presuppositionalist because about the subject that they presuppose. When Trey was talking about this, and he talked about evidentialists not having a strong enough position because it's probabilistic. My view is that there are no absolutes that we can verify, and probabilistic is the best we have, which is why I'm an evidentialist, which is why there was no chance that a classical analytic kind of thing was going to actually convince me, but you still get to present it. But he said that presuppositionalists, essentially, he went a roundabout, lengthy way of essentially claiming that it was a circular argument. You are assuming or presupposing the very thing that you should be defending. And that's not a defense. That's just an assertion. And that's why trying to have a conversation with a presuppositionalist is, in my view, a waste of time. So I don't plan to debate presupposition. I'm sure I will again. I'm sure somebody's going to surprise me, because despite what people think, I don't look up my opponents for these debates. I saw, I think, 30 seconds of Trey debating somebody else, because when I'm preparing for these debates, I don't prepare for the person, I prepare for the subject, which is why my introduction was about, is Christianity true?
You might be interested, Matt. I was supposed to debate Cy, and he backed out.
He's not allowed to debate anybody anymore.
No, this is before that.
Oh, yeah. I don't know the full on thing of what he did, but it seemed that there was some sexual sin, which his church chastised him about. And I was like, dude, leave your church, get laid, start thinking, and get back to, maybe you'll be in a better debater for it. But
he claims to be a Christian. Christians have a standard. He has disqualified himself permanently because I know the details.
Well, I don't know the details, so cool. I really don't care if somebody disqualifies himself as a Christian, because I'm no longer impressed with Christian apologists. But I will say, Muslim apologists are absolutely the worst, hands down, unequivocally. And the last five debates I've done, it's awful.
All right, well, let's continue on there. Oh my, calling out all kinds there. But yeah, fun. Let's continue with the super chats. I gotta scroll up again here. So yeah, thanks for that too, for the Kenneth. Yeah, we had some fun with that. LHRPG official, $5. Hey Matt, big fan. What's your favorite argument from theists for the existence of God to debunk? Well, I guess we'll say it's not presuppositionalists. We figured that out.
I don't know. It might be, because that's really the easiest. It is, why on earth are you trying to present an argument for the thing that you presuppose? I think it's really, and I think Trey kind of hit on this a little bit. I think it's really easy to show that presuppositionalist positions aren't worth discussing. There's not an argument presented. Similarly, I think the classicalism that Trey's advocating for is similar, but not the same and not as bad. I'm an evidentialist. I would prefer to have discussions with evidentialists, because I care about the facts of reality, and synthetic arguments get to the facts of reality rather than just the abstractions. Hey, okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say,
I'm blocking trolls in chat.
Oh, no problem at all.
Just for fun. It keeps it clear.
Do what you need to do. Block all the cave trolls you need to. But before Mac gives you a block there, smash the like wherever you're watching this from, Yeah, I was going to say, help us out. It's always fun. And I know our live chat might be mad at us because we almost spilled the tea a little bit on some of the Cy business there. But no cigar tonight, fellas. Russell H, $5. Thank you so much for your super chat. Trey, can you list 3 claims / aspects of Christianity and the evidence for them being true?
3 claims of Christianity? What do you mean?
I think there's probably.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
My main argument, what I would say, is that that as I begin with the beginning, that you cannot dispute the existence of God. It's an analytical necessity. You cannot dispute teleology, that God is purposive, because we instantiate, or purpose instantiates in us, and with the principle of proportionate causality, you must exist. And then the claims of Christianity is there's a reasonableness to the entire message of the special revelation of the Bible that is the scarlet thread. It's been called of Christ throughout the entire scriptures, that there was a beginning, there was a fall, and something needs to be fixed, and Christ is that remedy.
Any other thoughts there? Shall we continue? Yep. Sounds like we're good.
I can't list three facets of Christianity and why they're true. I can list three facets of Christianity, just not why they're true.
All right. I didn't know if you wanted to respond there. So Rhonda Arias, $7. How does someone who has not earthly father come from any paternal line? Please satisfy the claim that Jesus was born of a virgin. Sorry, Rhonda, that wasn't written out so great. How does someone who has not an earthly father come from any paternal line? So it's probably for you there, Trey.
Someone who does not have an earthly father not come from a paternal line. Well, they had a shared lineage, Joseph and Mary, but this is not my forte, but there's something about that there was someone who was cursed in Joseph's line, but I'm not really up on that. I don't know.
Is it important that Jesus was born of a virgin? For your particular take on Christianity, this is a curiosity. This is not a trap. Just curious.
Yes, Curdeas Homo. St. Anselm wrote a book on this, basically saying that Jesus had to be both man and God, because only God can make the eternal payment for the sin against an eternal being, and he also had to be man because it is man who he was making the atonement for. So that's why it's not some just little quirky thing, but it's a logical necessity that he be born of a virgin, both be God and man.
Okay. Wow. A logical necessity that he be born of a virgin, because the reason that you just gave of why it's important that he was born of a virgin, I don't understand how being born from a virgin does that. I don't know why God couldn't create someone who was fully God and fully man, and whether or not somebody's, because virginity is a bullshit concept. It's a complete fiction. There's no such thing as virginity in any kind of sense. But it would seem to me that if Mary had sex, God could still have impregnated her on his own and resulted in the man God, even if she wasn't a virgin. I don't understand what virginity has to do with it, or certainly not how it's a logical necessity. But
in what way would he be divine if he were procreated naturally?
I didn't say he would be procreated naturally. Mary could have had sex with someone else prior to this, and God could have still magically impregnated her, right?
No, because she would have been a sinner.
God can't magically impregnate a sinner?
Well, no, but why would he? Why would he not choose someone who's holy, who loves him?
Wow, it's like we're speaking different languages. Can God take a virgin and make that virgin pregnant?
He can, but why would he? Why would he not do it the way he did?
You just said he did. I said, can God take a virgin and make that person pregnant?
Yes, of course.
Can God do the same to someone who's not a virgin?
Yes, he could.
If God creates a baby in a non-virgin, how is that baby any different or less than the baby he created in the virgin?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your point.
Okay. Mary doesn't have sex. She's a virgin. God impregnates her with Jesus, and you say this is a logical necessity that she be a virgin. God could also impregnate someone who had previously had sex and is no longer a virgin.
But she wasn't married.
Yeah.
I give up. I give up. I give up. Everybody can see.
You are so thin-skinned.
You are so unwilling to actually engage with a subject that exposes your flaws.
My goodness.
My goodness. The point is, can God make a non-virgin woman pregnant with God's offspring? Go ahead, say why would he again. There you go. That's the answer. Not why would he, which you did multiple times. So if God can, then the question is, what is different? The question was, what is different about that offspring than Mary's offspring?
Because the woman that God overshadowed and made pregnant was not a faithful woman.
You don't no. We didn't include that in the criteria of our fictional abstract woman. Are you incapable of engaging in a hypothetical? Two women,
sure.
Two women, Mary and blah blah blah. Mary is a virgin. Blah 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 is not a virgin. God impregnates both of them. They both give birth to a child. What is the difference between those children from the standpoint of theology and divinity?
So the woman was married who God impregnated, right? Is what you're saying?
No,
that was not a virgin.
Married. I didn't say the word married. I didn't even mention the concept of married. One of them has fucked someone and one of them hasn't. That's the difference. Marriage is irrelevant. They both
Brian, can we move on
from God. Oh, can we move on? Running away, eh? You coward.
I have no idea what you're saying, Matt. And it's
I know you don't.
Well, if
but
Matt,
keep running.
Then why call me a coward?
Because you're running away because you're afraid to take a moment.
I am not afraid.
Well, you are. You're afraid to take a moment
gents. Like
to
I said,
think about the thing that might expose the problem. That's what you're running away from. You don't understand it, and so you're running away.
No, I just think I'm not running away from it. I just think we can move on. Seems like a silly point.
It's not a silly point. You asserted that it is logically necessary that God impregnate.
That she be holy. Yes.
No, sir, you liar. That God impregnate a virgin.
All right. Well,
that's what you said was logically necessary, and people can rewind it and see how you dodged it. That I was asking the specific questions to reductio your ass, and you ran away.
Oh, okay.
Your interruptions are so quick, Trey. I don't have time to go snap over there and mute you.
Brian, I don't even know I'm interrupting. It's like, what?
I know. Sometimes there can be stops and gaps in the internet and audio.
It's really fun. If you're done with the topic and ready to move on, you don't have to say anything, and then you won't be interrupted.
Well, our next one is coming in here. This one's from the last one actually from Russell. That was his first super chat. So thank you for that. Let's see here. Russell H, $5. Trey, did Jesus walk on water and heal the blind? If yes, what is the evidence of these miracles besides the claims themselves?
Besides the claims themselves, well, you have the very purpose of a miracle. I mean, miracles are conspicuous by their absence. So the very purpose of the miracle is to verify the message of the prophet. So, for example, you got people today like Benny Hinn or whatever, and they say they do miracles and do all these healings. They're not doing miracles. I don't believe miracles exist today. I think that there can be extraordinary providences with God. But a miracle, by definition, is something that is extraordinary, and the purpose is to verify that this person is speaking for God. For example, when Jim Jones says he is, speaking for God, I'm not going to believe him. And even if he can perform miracles, I'm not going to believe him, because the Bible says that God has spoken through the fathers, through the prophets, in various ways, but today he's spoken through his son. Even the charismatics today believe that their supernatural signs that they say are really not signs, because they don't, that when they're wrong, they say, well, it's not that big a deal. It's not the same thing. It's in the Bible. So I don't believe we have miracles as signs anymore. So the reason I believe the Bible is because of the signs. That's the only reason that I would want to believe that this person were supposedly speaking for God, that they could demonstrate through supernatural signs that they were speaking for God. Like Nicodemus meeting Jesus in the night, he said, you must be the Son of God, because nobody can do these unless God is with him.
Hey, Ryan, could you read the question again real quick?
Yeah, sure. Trey, did Jesus walk on water and heal the blind? If yes, what is the evidence of these miracles besides the claims themselves?
Trey didn't come close to even remotely answering the question. The question is about an epistemological way to justify that a claim about Jesus walking on water is in fact true. Trey instead went on to talk about miracles don't exist today, and he wouldn't believe people who did miracles and all of these other things. Trey offered absolutely nothing beyond he believes it. He didn't answer the question. He didn't provide evidence.
Okay, the question, the way that I'm not just believing the Bible because somebody told me it was so, but the Bible is considered to be an accurate representation of what happened in first century Palestine, and this would have been further on in my talk, by the science of archaeology, as evidenced by Sir William Ramsay, the Scottish archaeologist who was of the Tübingen school for C.F. Bauer, which was higher criticism in Germany. He was taught that that the book of Acts was written 100 years later than when it was purported to have been written. And he absolutely was a part of that school and was sure that Luke was not written when it was not authentic. And he spent his entire life studying the book of Luke Acts and came out of that saying that Luke is the greatest historian of antiquity. And it's even been said that he had the accuracy of Thucydides, which is a father of scientific history. So the example that we have in the book, say, for example, in Luke as an author, is he's been called the greatest historian of antiquity. So we have an accurate rendition of what has been said there, and we have a faithful witness of what was said at that time. So it's not just like, oh, well, somebody told me that the Bible is true, therefore it's true. No, the science of archaeology has given us a testimony that the witnesses of New Testament were faithful in telling us what was happening.
Yeah, the problem is that the question was, what evidence is there beyond the claim? And Trey said that he doesn't just believe the Bible because someone says so, it's about the archaeology. Well, I was going to ask, what is the archaeological evidence that confirms Jesus walked on water? But we don't have to waste time on that because there isn't any, there can't be, despite your interruption. What archaeological evidence could there be that Jesus walked on water? So instead, Jesus Christ, instead, what he says is how this archaeologist talks about Acts being written 100 years later and Luke being the greatest historian to show that what he's reporting is accurate. But that isn't evidence in addition to the claim in the Bible that is the claim. And the fact is, despite twice saying that he doesn't just believe the Bible because someone says it's so, all he pointed to was someone saying it's so.
Okay, what evidence would be good enough for you that Jesus walked on water?
See, that's irrelevant. That's not what was asked at all. The question, no, it's not. Nobody asked what would convince me. They asked, what evidence do you have beyond the claim? And now that you've dodged it twice, you're asking me what evidence would convince me of that, or what evidence should convince me of that. That wasn't the question. I'm sorry that you can't be honest and address it, because the right answer is there is no evidence beyond the claim. And for you, that's enough.
And is the claim a reliable rendering of what happened?
No.
Okay, why?
Because someone saying a miracle occurred isn't sufficient evidence to warrant believing that a miracle occurred. There needs to be additional evidence for it because of its extraordinary nature. Saying I just got a new puppy doesn't require anything beyond your word, because I have mountains of evidence in reality of people having puppies. Saying you just got a new fire-breathing dragon requires some evidence beyond your word. Saying someone walked on water, hell, I saw a video of Dynamo walking on the water, and he's just a magician. There needs to be more, and that's evidence. It's just that there's another explanation. When somebody says, what evidence beyond the biblical claim is there for Jesus walking on water? The one and only correct answer is there isn't any, which is what you were trying to get to, but you didn't. And instead, you talked about everything else.
So, Matt, is it possible for there to be some kind of evidence that would verify that empirically?
I don't know what evidence we could reasonably expect for a historic claim of a miracle, but if there's a God anything that would qualify as a God, anything that would qualify as the Christian God, should be capable of presenting all of us with indisputable evidence for these claims. And that doesn't happen.
Well, I gave the claim at the beginning of this argument, and you would not deal with it. If there is a creator, is it a problem for him to interrupt the supernatural and to perform a miracle?
That's the first time that question or sentence has come up during this debate. How could you say that you did this at the beginning?
It was the first part of my whole argument, that there's a creator. If a creator creates something ex nihilo, is it a difficult thing to think logically that something could transcend what we see naturally, like water to wine, or loaves and fishes being multiplied?
Not only was that not discussed or brought up, it's irrelevant to this. The issue here is what evidence is sufficient to warrant.
Oh my gosh.
You know what? Fuck it, Trey. I'm done teaching you. You're incapable of learning.
I'm just too stupid.
Yep. Yes, you are. I've never done that in a debate, but you are clearly either too stupid or too scared, because I was actually sitting here saying, wow, we're getting close to something. And then you presented, as if you'd presented it 2 or 3 times before or at the beginning, a subject which doesn't actually address this. And it's just, we are incapable of having a conversation about this, because the issue here is, what evidence do you have beyond the claim? We don't have any. What evidence, and you like to respin that to what evidence could we have? And I don't know what evidence we could have in a world without a God. But in a world with a God, we could have incontrovertible demonstrations of the truth of everything. Are you saying that God is incapable of providing evidence of his existence?
I think that he has given us incontrovertible evidence, and you will not even deal with it because you can't.
That's funny for somebody who's not an evidentialist and avoided presenting any evidence, but thank you.
All right, let's carry on with our super chats there. We'll try to bring it back full circle here, everybody. Before we continue on, though, we've been going now for, almost 2 hours. So if you gents wanted to have a moment here to grab a drink or use the washroom, that's fine by us. I can find a question for either one of you. No? Okay.
Oh, I thought we were done at the 2 hour, but.
Well, we still have a few super chats, so we can try to blast through them. I mean, when I say a few, I mean
give shorter answers.
Yeah, I was going to say, we did have a quick open discussion. So, we'll try to blast through them. And when I say that, I meant that I needed to take care of that myself. So, Moment, $5. Trey, Jesus is part of the omniscient Trinity, yet Mark 13:32 quotes, "No one knows, nor the Son, but only the Father." How do you explain this?
Because Jesus was speaking of his category as a man. As a man, he was not as a category. As a man, he did not know the day or the hour of was it his return? Did he go somewhere?
I'm going to guess that that Ryan bolted out for a bathroom break, so we could scream at each other for a minute if you wanted to. You brought this up and kind of touched on the Trinity. It's obviously it's too much to get into a couple of minutes before the debates to end. But when the question is, how did Jesus not know something? I am confused at how, and I don't necessarily know that you or anybody else is going to have an explanation for this, because nobody's given a satisfactory explanation of the Trinity as far as I can tell. But to say when somebody is both fully God and fully man, to then say he's answering in his capacity as a man, are you saying that he knew but wouldn't say? Because clearly in his capacity as a God, he knew, right?
No, according to his human nature, he did not know. That's what he was speaking of there.
But he's also God and has a God nature, and that nature knew, right?
Yes, and according to his deity, he did know.
Okay, so this being who is both God and man knows the answer is God, but opts to answer as a man and says he doesn't know.
Yes, there's a voluntary.
How is that not a lie?
There's a voluntary veiling of his knowledge in his condescension in humanity.
How is that not a lie?
Well, if he's lying, That wouldn't make him a very good savior, would it?
That's not my problem. I don't think he's a very good savior to begin with. He didn't sacrifice anything. There's nothing to be saved from or to. But I would, gladly sacrifice more than Jesus ever did. But the question isn't, does that make him a very good savior? My question was, doesn't that make it a lie?
No, it doesn't, because he has two natures.
What, some people would say that people who are two-faced are liars, and that if you claim to have two natures and one of your natures knows the answer to a question and the other one doesn't, not only does that not make any sense, but if you opt to answer as the one that doesn't, you are being intentionally deceptive. Can God be intentionally deceptive?
No.
So did he harden Pharaoh's heart?
Yes, but what that means in
Did he give people over to reprobate minds?
Yes, he just
did he speak in parables? Did he speak in parables in order to intentionally confuse people?
If I were you, I would be screaming and hollering that you're talking over me and not letting me talk.
I know. I know. It's tough when it comes back that way, but did he intentionally talk in parables so that people wouldn't understand what he was saying?
Yes, he said that in such a way so that the people who were humble would ask for help, and those who are proud would receive what they deserve, which is ignorance.
Yeah, and then he put it all down in a book so that everybody could see that he was doing it. So when you say that he's not capable of being dishonest, you are wrong.
Okay, well, you don't understand it.
I understood it. It's explained there. Right after Jesus gets done speaking in a parable, his disciples ask him what he meant, and he explains it to them. So it's written down in the book. It's like saying, hey, let's wipe these people off the planet and never speak about them again, but let's write it down in the book so that people speak about them again. The Bible is embarrassing on things like that.
No, it's not, because you say you understand it, but you don't understand it.
Okay.
You are part of the ones that have a hardened heart, and it goes right over your head. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what Robin Hood at a tomb. Would I use the same? I mean, the thing about Jesus is different from Robin Hood is Jesus claimed to be the Messiah, the promised Messiah.
I've let our chat down again here because I popped out for just 1 second there because I'm not as pro as these guys at holding my bladder, that's for sure. So I'll read the question again just because our live
Mine's
chat.
going to fail in about 10 minutes, but.
No, sorry? I missed that.
Mine will fail in about 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, if you
I drank a big thing of Gatorade during this.
Yeah, at any time, if you need to step out, I'll, like I said, I'll pass the buck over to and try to find a question for the other person. So the question that we were just addressing there, everybody, was, Trey, Robin Hood has a tomb that is said to belong to him. How would one investigate whether it did or didn't belong to him in reality? Did you use the same criteria for Jesus's tomb?
No, I wouldn't, because Jesus had just an incredibly rich history of the promised Messiah that could be trained. His lineage could be studied and known that it was more than just some guy coming along and coming down in a parachute and saying, yeah, I'm this or that, and look after it. But the person of Christ is so much different than Robin Hood would ever be. So it really wouldn't. I mean, there might be some things in common that you're going to look at, maybe, eyewitness accounts or something like that. But I'm going to focus more on the promised Messiah. And if Jesus fulfilled the promise of the Messiah, and then his sacrifice, which was supposed to be the Messiah, was supposed to be for his people, and then he had to be raised from the dead so that his sacrifice was received, and that he was, because death is the punishment for sin. And so Christ rising from the dead shows that sacrifice was received. So it's a completely different thing than just talking about Robin Hood from my perspective.
Yeah, and I completely disagree. For any proposed tomb of person, whether that person is real or fictional, if we have a proposed tomb, the same methodology should be used to verify whether or not that tomb belonged to that person. You don't go and see, do they have a rich history of being a promised Messiah? That's irrelevant to whether or not a particular tomb fits a particular person. And the methodology that you would use should be the same.
Oh, maybe so. I didn't know he was talking about a specific particular tomb, because we don't know where Christ's tomb is, do we?
I don't know.
I don't think we do.
I don't, but Christians, as I mentioned in the opening, which may have been what he's responding to, frequently talk about the empty tomb. And
yeah, but we don't have the tomb.
Okay, but do you think there was an empty tomb?
Well, there were eyewitness accounts, over 500 of them.
We don't have any eyewitness accounts, and we certainly don't have 500. You don't have an account of any eyewitness. No book in none of the New Testament was written by eyewitnesses, and what you have are secondhand accounts of people supposedly talking about an empty tomb. But my question was, do you believe there's an empty tomb?
Yes, I'm a Christian. If Christ is not raised, then I'm dead in my sins, as you stated in 1 Corinthians 15.
Yeah. So you believe there's an empty tomb, although your only evidence for the empty tomb is a claim in the book that there's an empty tomb. And the question here was, how could you verify the empty tomb? You don't think you know where it is, but you think you know that it is. And that's a different question, both of which are problematic for me.
Because the Messiah was said to die and to rise.
Okay. Which also isn't a methodology for figuring out if it's true.
Oh,
except that it was told exactly what would happen before it happened.
No, it wasn't told exactly what was happened. And what your interpretation and other people's interpretation of prophecy doesn't mean that what happened is actually what was prophesied.
All right, well, let's try to continue on there, everybody. High Flyer, $4.99. If I'm a cisgendered, non-binary Marxist lizard, am I an illusion? Why?
Go ahead, man.
I have no idea if you're an illusion. I don't think you're an illusion, but I don't know that. So a cisgendered, non-binary Marxist lizard, yeah, actually, in that case, you would potentially be an illusion because you have contradictory labels in being cisgendered and non-binary.
That's not true, because we're living in an anomalous world where people can be whatever they want to be.
No, sir. Cisgendered and non-binary would be the rough equivalent of saying you're a married bachelor.
What if you redefine those terms, which is what they do today?
Well, you know, if you're going to redefine those terms, then you've redefined terms and we're no longer talking about the same thing. But that's not what the trans community is actually doing. Cisgender and non-binary have specific uses that are uniform across the entire trans community. I would recommend that you call into the Transatlantic Call-In show some Thursday, except that that's the show that my wife does, and I'd rather not have her annoyed by you.
All right, well, let's carry on there, everybody. And thanks for your super chats. And we're going to try to carry on and keep rolling through. Pibble Punk for $5. This has been the best thing to watch while unbelievably blitzed. Well, cheers, brother. We appreciate you, Pibble Punk, for your super chat. And I'm sorry for letting y'all down with my mute button there earlier. I've been a real cad tonight with that. So, Foot Ocker, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll pay you back with a good impression. $5. Let's see what we got here. At least we didn't hear those horrible minimal facts arguments tonight. Any thoughts, gents?
We didn't.
All right. Ozian Talks, $5. All right, we'll try to give you a Peterson on that one. Matt, did Trey's non-argument prove Christianity is false? What's your favorite snake?
I was supposed to debate Ozian and he backed out.
I don't know who that is.
He's a flat Earth expert, I guess, or something like that. Which, by the way, I can't stand flat Earth.
He's a national treasure. Not to cut you off, but no.
A flat Earth expert. That's like a Bigfoot expert, only worse.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, he does. He does a lot of debates on here against the flat Earth side. So he was on against Whitsitt there last.
So I'll hit two things because I referred to Arden as my wife, and people in chat are like, when are they getting? We're not officially married. We've referred to each other as partner, wife, husband, other thing. Sometimes that's just what I say, having been married for years. We're not legally married. We might as well be. But I don't want to saddle her with my financial stuff. Otherwise, we probably would be. On the favorite snake front, I think the critically endangered and almost non-existent San Francisco garter snake is probably easily one of my favorites and incredibly beautiful. And you can't have one because they're endangered status. You can get a California red-sided, which is really close. It's just not quite as nice as the San Francisco. But
So you don't have that snake, you just like that snake.
yes, I love that snake. And I have snake. Well, I have hundreds of, well, not hundreds yet, but 60 some odd snakes right now. That's my other business. But I don't have any of the San Francisco garter snakes because I can't. It would be illegal.
Not allowed to? Okay.
There's several others that I'd like to have that I can't. I can't have a Texas indigo, but I can have other snakes that are similar. Anyway, this isn't the snake debate.
Yeah, that's all fun. Well, we answered the question, and thank you so much for that, Matt and Ozium, for your super chat there. And yeah, it's hard to do Peterson with headphones on. I'm sorry. It sometimes it's just
You do a good
Kermit.
job, though.
It sometimes just turns into Kermit over here. All right. So polarity, $20. Trey, who you are can be changed with altering the brain. When I die and manifest as a soul somehow, which version of me will I be? The one that was hated toward LGBTQ people because my pastor told me to, or after I changed?
We
Can
have
you
different
reread
orientations
that?
in our perspective.
I'm sorry. I thought.
I think they're basically asking the question of like, which me am I going to be, in heaven or as a soul? Like, which me am I going to be? A young me? Am I going to be old me? He's
I'm
saying,
sorry.
so
I
am I going to be?
misunderstood that they're asking me.
Yeah, so they're saying like, am I going to be hateful towards LGBTQ people, like my pastor told me to, or am I going to be different? Obviously, they're saying that they're no longer hateful towards LGBT people, so they're saying, am I going to be the person that I am after that opinion changed, or am I going to be the person before that?
I think that when you die, you will be the person that you die at. I mean, we all change our minds many times in our lives.
That's actually, I know there's a long history of talking about this in heaven and this in Christendom about who am I going to be in heaven, because if I die at 90, I'm going to get a new body and, am I going to have a body like that? And that's what a lot of people focus on. And they're like, oh no, you'll be your idealistic version. And there's nothing in the Bible that supports anybody reaching any conclusion on what you might look like physically. But I would have to agree with Trey that who you are mentally at the point of death is the only thing that makes sense to move forward. Because if you, commit apostasy or fall away or change your views on something, it wouldn't make any sense for like 18-year-old mental me to be in an afterlife based on all the rest of the life that happened. So even though none of us know, and I have no reason to think it's real, I think that's the most reasonable conclusion to make with if you adopted Christian theology.
All right. Let's carry on there, fellas, if you got all your thoughts out on that. No afterthoughts there, Trey? All right. Let's continue on. Then. And thank you for your question there. There we go. Blake, $4.99. Matt, do you think the founders of Christianity, Paul, Peter, James, etc., were sincere in their belief, or could they have had another motive?
I don't have any way of assessing that because I don't have any way of investigating. If we were to assume that we have an accurate record of their thoughts, then I would think it's not. I would think it'd be a mix. I would think that there were things that they were going to be sincere about, and there's things like any other human being that you might exaggerate or put the best look on. I mean, all these, let God be true and every man a liar, all of these individuals are still just human beings. But I don't think I have any way to accurately assess who these people were and what they thought, because the Bible that I have today while we can be fairly confident that it is fairly accurate to what was written down in the earliest manuscripts, we don't have any autographs. We don't have any of the earliest manuscripts. We have copies of translations of copies. And while there are mistakes in there that people want to write off as scribal errors, the claims that are in there are such that if I can't substantiate them, it would be a mistake for me to say, hang on, Paul was definitely telling the truth, especially when Paul and Peter were at odds. It's like trying to pick out, I know more about who I trust in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing than I do in the Paul, Peter, James, John, all of those. And ironically, how sad of a testament is it to God's actions to preserve a record of truth that this is all we have, a handful of scraps of writing that tell a story, and then nothing for a couple thousand years after.
Any thoughts over there, Trey, or do you want to carry on?
Well, the New Testament is the best attested work of antiquity by exponential numbers.
And I'm the funniest guy in this room by exponential numbers, but that doesn't tell anybody how funny I am.
Okay.
Well, darn it, we can't all just be charming, can we? All right, let's carry on then and try to be good comedians here. All right, John, at least myself, right? I'm just here to read the questions and keep it flowing. But we still got quite a bit to go, so let's keep it brief if you guys want to get out of here in good time. John, $3. Trey, embrace mystery. How is that an explanation? So they're saying that you're advocating to embrace mystery as an explanation.
Boy, I hope I can do that. I want to try to do this as quickly as I can. There are three categories. There is a contradiction, there's paradox, and there's mystery. A contradiction is something that is irrational and you cannot be reconciled. A paradox is something that you think is contradictory, but then on further investigation, you see that it actually is reconcilable. Like Jesus saying, if you want to save your life, you must lose it, and you can come and you can reconcile that. But mystery is something that that is necessarily an aspect of God's communicating with us. He must analogize his language in order for us to be able to understand, because the only way we can understand logic is through complexity. So for us to make a sentence for logic is subject plus predicate. But for God, he knows everything all at once and at one time, so that he must accommodate himself with language that we can understand. Because if he were to share that type of knowledge to us, then it would be a predication. It's impossible for him to share exactly what he is, because sharing it itself is a potentiality actualized. So it necessarily follows, if there's such a thing as a self-existent being, then there must be at some point a point of mystery. Now, many people will jump to mystery way too early, and I say that's cheating. But to say that there is mystery is somehow a cop-out is actually no. Logic teaches us that there must be such a thing as mystery, because simplicity cannot be
Let's try to wrap it in 10
and
seconds there, Trey, if you can.
I'm sorry. I'll leave it there. I'm sorry. It's really a deep question.
I guess so. I'm sorry about that. Did you have any thoughts?
I was liking it when we were talking about contradiction and paradox, but when you tied mystery to an aspect of God communicating, I was like, wow, why do we have to go to God there? But I think the takeaway from that is that God cannot make us so that we are capable of understanding him. That's a failure on God's part. That's a failure on God's part.
No, God cannot make himself.
If God can't make us capable of understanding him, then there is something that God fails to do, God is incapable of doing.
Okay, if God were to make himself, then how could he make us eternal if he made us? It's irrational.
I didn't say anything about God making
reasonable.
himself. I didn't say anything about God making himself or eternal.
Because you don't understand the concept.
It's like, yeah, I don't understand. I'm the idiot. You tossed out a word salad that's irrelevant afterwards, but I don't understand. Sorry.
You didn't understand it, but it's not like I'm just saying things.
God cannot make us capable of understanding is your position. Understanding him is your position. And that means that there's something that God can't do.
Okay, next question, please.
All right, let's continue on. Rasa, $5. What is logical about one person dying for sins of others on top dying for anyone who is a failure, a future follower? More logically, dying person is God. This is very strangely worded, gents, so if you can figure out what's going on there. What is logical about one person dying for sins of others?
There's nothing logical about anyone dying for anything. There's nothing logical about having to slaughter lambs for the sacrifice or to slaughter God incarnate as a sacrifice. It is blood magic that is archaic and stupid.
There must be punishment for sin.
Yeah,
All right.
except there's not, but that's all right.
Well, let's try to carry on. Maybe we got something that you guys can sink your teeth into a little bit deeper here. Let's try not to butcher your name. Tafka Twitcher, €5. Trey, do you believe that Jesus could walk on water?
Yes. He was God.
Any thoughts on the other side, or carry on?
No,
All right.
that's both the answer to whether he could, as far as I can tell, and whether I have anything else to add.
Alrighty. Desmond Smith, $5. Trey, can you tell me why more women weren't authors in the Bible? If it's the word of God, shouldn't have the word of all people?
Well, no, because it's a patriarchal society, and Christianity is a patriarchal religion. It doesn't mean that men or women are less than others, but men are the leaders.
That's literally what patriarchy means. Wow.
Yeah.
It literally means that women are less, and the Bible holds women as less.
No, it doesn't.
It absolutely does from start to
Have
finish.
you read the New Testament?
Hold on.
It absolutely does from start to finish, including how much you should pay for them as slaves and whether or not they are treated in the same way and have to be let go as slaves. Women aren't allowed to own property in the same way that men are. I've done an entire video, start to finish, of how the Bible does not in any way promote women as equal. And you absurdly just said that it's a patriarchal view, but that doesn't mean that women are inferior, when that's literally what patriarchy means.
There's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. What does that mean?
That is about whether or not you are eligible for salvation, not whether or not you are equal.
No, God thinks that women are less beings.
They are inferior to men. As man is the head of the house, as Christ is the head of the church. It talk about who can own property, how much property they can own, who inherits, what they inherit. Women are not equal in the Bible, period. It's not even.
They have different roles.
This isn't even controversial. Anybody who
you don't know
knows
what
the
you're talking
Bible, anybody who knows about, go watch my video where I do chapter and fucking verse.
Okay, F and this and F and that.
You are lying about, or you're ignorant about what the Bible actually says.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, well, let's try to carry on there, fellas. We're having a pretty lively discussion. It's juicy, that's
I got
for
10
sure.
minutes and then I'm done.
All right, let's carry on then. Yeah, so Robin Page, thanks for your super chat. It's just an ad hom, so I'm not going to read it. Thunderstorm, $4.99. Trey, a god/goddess creating the Star of David representing Canaanite people care about other peoples. Why would a Slav worship Slavic gods?
I don't know. Is he complaining because God doesn't love all people equally or something? Is that the point? Because God is not obligated to love everyone equally. Make some people for mercy and some for wrath to express his justice.
All right. Well, if you want to clarify there in the live chat, that's fine. We'll carry on. Robin Page, the debate topic was, is Christianity true? As in, was Jesus the Son of God? Was he born of a virgin? Did he die for our sins? Was he raised from the dead and ascended to heaven? Trey totally ignored it. Thoughts, Trey?
I didn't ignore it. You got to have a God before you have his word.
You got to waste 10 minutes talking about evidentialists and presuppositionalists before you present any actual argument.
Any thoughts there, Trey?
No, I mean, no.
Okay, let's carry on then. So Jacob Smith, $4.99. There's no question attached, but thanks for your super chat. We'll just carry on here, guys, because we got to get this closed out here, and we got lots. Well, not lots, but I'm gonna stop preamble. Tag Hua again for $5. Matt, if intentionality is an ontological property matter can possess, why must a non-contingent entity lack intention?
Why must a non-contingent entity lack intention? I don't know that it must.
But you assert that it is, right? That it's unintentional if there is a necessary being.
No, I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't assert anything, and I'm trying to answer this question here. One more time with the question, just to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
Yeah, sure thing. So, if intentionality is an ontological property matter can possess, why must a non-contingent entity lack intention?
I've never said that it must lack intention. A non-contingent entity may or may not lack intention. I don't know. I don't know of any non-contingent entities.
Alrighty. Yeah, we'll keep it to the person that's addressed to, I guess, for the rest of the debate here, just to close this out. Just laugh and honk your nose, $5. Why does Trey address the moral question of infinite punishment for finite crimes? I'm just jumping in, so apologies if I'm assuming something incorrect.
The finite crimes are against an infinite being and therefore require an infinite punishment.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Trey, and thank you to our super chatter. Demolisher, $5. Trey, just for fun, if you were an atheist, what would you imagine your deconstruction to be like?
I would need somebody to demonstrate to me that contingent being can instantiate non-contingently.
All righty. Robin Page for $5. The existence of Mormonism is proof that any religion can be completely fabricated to fool and control the ignorant. Trey, explain Mormonism. I'll say about a minute or so.
Okay, well, he just sapped off of Christianity with some wild stories that have no verification whatsoever. He's a good storyteller, Joseph Smith.
Kind of what happened with Judaism.
No, because it's historically verifiable.
No, it's not.
Archaeology doesn't verify it.
Archaeology does not verify doctrine. It does not verify the supernatural. These are the list in my opening. You see, you didn't bother to address anything that I said in my opening or even attempt to rebut it.
We never got that far.
I know we didn't, because you didn't even make a case for is Christianity true, but I gave categories, and mundane things like place names aren't relevant.
All right, let's carry on there, fellas. So Pointless Poppy, $4.99. To you, Trey, why didn't God give the power of writing to all witnesses of Jesus to ensure we know his existence was real?
You mean, why weren't there more authors? Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, he said, why not give it to all people?
I mean, to me, that just says, well, why didn't he do it a different way that I would like? I don't know.
All right. Well, yeah, that's what we got there. So let's carry on. Charles Lehner, $1.99. Trey, where can we find you online?
Look, my name. My YouTube channel is my name.
All right, that's not.
Oh, I'm on Twitter too. Not really on Facebook.
Now, in post-production, if it's not already there, we will have both of our debaters tagged in the description, and it will be in our podcast. So check them out if you like what you're hearing. Matt, where can anybody find you at? Where are you hanging out?
Just Google my name. You go to patreon.com/atheistdebates. My YouTube channel, Sans Deity, where you will find a video about what the Bible actually says about women, along with many, many other videos, including new ones posted tomorrow. And one of them should be on my Highlander argument against Christianity.
All right. It seemed like good PR to ask both sides there. Stegobro, $4.99. We use the Gregorian calendar to this day. Matt, what does AD and BC stand for?
Anno Domini and before Christ, or whatever the other one is, but I tend to use CE and BCE.
All righty. Let's carry on there, unless you had any thoughts there, Trey.
No, I don't know what the question was for.
No, okay. It was we used the Gregorian calendar. It was for Matt, so let's carry on. Connor Klassen, $6.99 Canadian. Trey, could evidence for Christianity or God be better than it is? And if God wants to save all, then why isn't it?
God doesn't want to save all.
Ooh, short and snappy.
Could the evidence be better than it is?
No, because it's not. There's plenty of evidence.
So the evidence couldn't be better than it is because it's not. So that it is impossible that there could be better evidence for Christianity.
Right, because then you would be saying God had a deficiency of the way he did something.
Cool.
All right. John, $10. Trey, you claim we are no longer in a time of miracles. Do you claim that your perceived absence of miracles is evidence we are no longer in a time of miracles? Please elaborate how you know this. So, yeah, up to a minute there again.
I'm not saying there's no supernatural intervention. I'm saying there's no miracles to verify the word of God because people are not still writing the Bible. So strictly speaking, that term miracle is a misnomer. I would say the Puritans use the term extraordinary providences and like ordinary providences. Ordinary providences like God's using doctors to be able to come up with aspirin and stuff like that. Extraordinary providence would be God supernaturally helping you in a situation where you need to be. I do believe in that, but I just don't believe there are people going around speaking the word of God anymore. And those people that pretend do, they're just it's their imagination, in my opinion.
All right. You heard it here, guys. It's in your imagination, says Trey. We're going to continue on. Yeah, we still have quite a bit of questions here. Let's try to whack them out. John, Trey, sorry, we just read that one. Max Bones, that's why I got tripped up. $9.99. No question attached there, but thank you for your $9.99. Twister Dude, $5. Thanks for being on the show, Matt. Love your dissection of these illogical positions. So you got a fan.
Don't need fans, but thanks.
All right. Well, thank you for your $5. And yeah, Justin, for another $5. Trey, can you explain what you think the difference is between epistemology and ontology? What is your standard for knowledge?
Okay, epistemology is our perception of reality. Ontology is just what is. I'm a Christian Platonist, so I believe there's an objective reality outside of us, and our opinion of it has nothing to do with it. I believe in a correspondence theory of truth. So epistemology is just our perception of reality and how we know what we know. And you can come up with, sciences on how that is and different theories, but that's basically what's in here, and ontology is what just is.
All right. Any thoughts on the other side? You want to carry on?
I wouldn't have thought he didn't know. I don't even know why somebody would ask that question. Those two things, I would have phrased it slightly differently, but he's not telling her. Epistemology is the philosophical exploration of how do we know what we know. And ontology is just what is, what a thing is. So I wouldn't have ever suspected that Trey didn't know that. So I don't understand the question.
I just said what you said.
Yeah, we're all in agreement.
So,
that's good.
So when I said that I would say it a little bit differently, I said it a little bit differently. Because one of the things that you did say about epistemology, I find to be problematic, but I didn't want to waste time on it.
Okay,
and I was sitting here defending you and calling the question absurd, but never mind.
Oh, I misunderstood you. I apologize.
Yeah, you fucking misunderstood me all night.
All right, Notion
So
Slave.
done.
Notion Slave for
I got 1
$4.99.
minute, Ryan. No kidding.
All right. Well, that's all right. We'll try to get the questions whacked out. $4.99. What is the most impressive prophecy or miracle in your opinions that can be verified today? Any thoughts there, Trey?
Well, the most important would be the resurrection, I would say.
Okay. Justin.
Question said can be verified today. I
don't
see
that can be verified today. That would be Matt's existence.
Okay.
He's a contingent being.
Justin, for $10. In classical Judaism, there is no concept
miracle.
of hell and no concept of original sin. If God changed his mind on this, does this not imply he made a mistake and thus is not perfect?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
That's all right. Yeah, so Matt, if you've only got 1 minute left, if you wanted to make a closing statement before you take off, that's, if you need to leave now, that's fine. But if you wanted to make a closing statement with the time you got left, that's fine by me.
I could knock something out in 30 seconds. Go back and listen to my opening. Is Christianity true? We talked about the various types, or I talked about the various types of claims and how we would potentially go about looking to see if something is true. What would we have to consider it evidently true or not evidently true or evidently not true? Basically, true and false with an indeterminate thing. And if we had started tonight by saying, is Christianity false? Then I would have had the burden of proof to demonstrate what about Christianity is evidently not true. And despite the fact that I didn't have that burden of proof, I listed many things: the order of creation, the origin of humans, language, animals, facts inconsistent with reality is a big problem. And how do you go about figuring out what the truth is? Miracles, which he doesn't think exist. But my entire case was about using evidence. And he thinks the best evidence already exists, which makes me wonder why anybody who thinks the best evidence already exists wouldn't argue about the evidence. And clearly, it seems to be from a recognition that the evidence is insufficient. And he pointed out why he objects to evidentialists. So despite the fact that he thinks that there's a God who has not failed at all to give the best possible evidence for Christianity, his view of evidentialism is just that it's just probability, and that's not good enough. So let's do something better than address the evidence he thinks God gave. And that's why we heard virtually nothing from him about whether or not Christianity is true, and everything about a flawed attempt to define what could potentially serve as an explanation for anything that exists. That's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt, so much for being here. It's been a lot of fun. Don't worry, everybody. We will finish up the questions, but Matt's going to leave the Zoom chat now. So thanks for being here, Matt, and everybody give like I said, a big round of applause in the live chat.
Matt.
Thanks for being here, Matt, and we'll see you next time.
Later.
Adios.
Later, Gator. All right. It's just me and you now, so we will continue answering the rest of your questions if that's all right by you, Trey.
Sure.
And as per usual modern day debate fashion, I will ask you, Trey, just to try to not make mention of the person that's not in the room anymore now that Matt's no longer here, or if you do make mention, just specifically the arguments. That's usually the way we do things, anyways. But sometimes.
Well, if I have a closing statement, do I?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. So, as for our super chats, Justin, yeah, we read that one. Sorry about that. Justin for $10. In classical Judaism, there is no concept of hell and no concept of original sin. If God changed his mind on this, does this not imply he made a mistake and thus not perfect?
Yes, if God changed his mind, he'd change the law. But the ignorance of Old Testament believers toward the concept of hell in no way says that God did not intend that or he somehow changed his mind.
Alrighty. And depending on how much time you have as well, Trey, like I said, you can elaborate more, unless you're in a bit of a hurry to get moving on yourself, in which case you go at whatever pace you'd like.
Well, yeah, I'd like to close it up in here pretty soon if we could.
All right, that's fine. I will move along then. VDub asks, Matt, are you more gaming? Do you have more gaming streams coming in the future? I'm sure he does. I think he does like gaming on Twitch and stuff like that. So.
Oh, Matt does that? He does Twitch?
I think so. I mean, I haven't been on Twitch, so I don't know. But if memory serves, I'm pretty sure he said he does do that. So, High Flyer $4.99. Is the San Francisco gardener snake strung out on heroin and defecating all over the SF streets? Well,
next question.
Aren't you fun, High Flyer? I think somebody said in the chat that God is most high. I think you might be the most high right now. Go have a drink of water. You'll be better. All right. Herber Arredondo, $5. Why will you not defend the veracity of an almighty being that confirms Christianity?
When did I say I wouldn't do that? I came here as a Christian defending the Christian faith, so I'm not sure where you got that.
All right. And last one here from Behead Kamikaze. So $5 for Matt, Trey, and Ryan. What is the one best piece of evidence that could show Christianity is true? Each in your best Australian accent. Oh, jeez. No, sir. I'm too tired now.
That Christianity is true. Again, I'm going to use before I go out to get on the Barbie, I'm going to say that there must be a God in order for there to be contingent existence, which is myself. So that would be the best evidence for Christianity from my perspective.
All right. Well, Matt's not here to give his piece of evidence. And, this is my advantage here, everybody. I've remained hopefully enigmatic, as far as what I believe. Hopefully nobody's caught a good sniff of that besides maybe Ozian, who's debated me on a few things in the old Discord there. So maybe this will be my chance to just say, if anybody from our Discord is hanging out in our live chat, tag our Discord, because you can find me in there when I'm not busy with my kids or, being a husband and all that fun jazz and all the guitar playing I like to do, screaming in people's faces, all that, etc. Good stuff. So what we're going to do, everybody, Trey, we'll hand it over to you. So I think Matt had, he said he was going to take like 30 seconds. I think he was like a minute and a half. So you can riff for a little bit here about your closing thoughts. I won't really, I'll let you know when you've gone on for 2 minutes, if that sounds good.
Okay, well, I won't take that long. I don't have much to say. But thank you, Ryan, for inviting me. It was an enjoyable discussion. Didn't get nearly as far as I wanted to. But if you remember, when I started in my opening statement, I said, I was going to tell you before it happened that I was going to get obfuscation. I was going to get name calling. I was going to get people wanting to change the subject. But one thing I wasn't going to get is a rebuttal to the argument. And it was even worse than I thought. He would not even engage the argument. And sure as the world, I said, well, maybe Matt is the great savior of the atheistic community, but unfortunately he was not, just as I thought it wouldn't. Like I said, I've been engaged in this argument forever. It's an analytical argument, people. It's an argument that cannot be refuted. You cannot have dependent being instantiating independently. Something cannot make itself. And if you are a dependent being, then there must be something somewhere that has the attribute of self-existent. And Matt was almost wanting to concede, it sounded like, but then he said, but it's got to be a non-personal being or not an agent. And again, I would say that by way of the fact that we are agents and we are personal, then that which gave rise to us must have those same attributes. Otherwise, we would not have them. So I don't feel like we didn't engage the argument very much, but Matt wouldn't even go there. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a big loser and I don't know what I'm doing, as usually people say, and that's fine. But it's got to make sense to me if you're going to demonstrate that I was wrong, because to me, that seemed like I like Matt. He's a very intelligent guy. He's a nice guy, but he was one of the worst guys. And he'd probably say the same thing about me. He wouldn't even engage the argument. And so we couldn't even hardly move off of first base on that. But anyway, it was enjoyable to be able to interact with him and to participate in modern day debate. I very much appreciate James and Ryan. They're very nice individuals, and they do a great job of moderating debate and not taking sides, and I very much appreciate that. And so Ryan, thank you for taking time this Friday, and thank you for providing this venue for us to talk.
Yeah, for sure. And let's chat a little bit after this for a few minutes, and because I've got some other prospects for you here, I think, as far as what's going on. But Sim Life, you caught me. Always, I'm Nova Scotian. What can you expect? All right, everybody, this was our debate. Matt Dillahunty versus Trey Jadlow. Is Christianity true? Hit that like button. Share this out in all those spaces where you like to argue. Send it to that uncle of yours that you're always debating with. Have some fun with it. And in the meantime, we are going to see you probably, I'd say, from the looks of things, we'll see you in about 4 days. So cheers, everybody. Enjoy your evening, and peace out.
See ya.
world of regression. Tyranny's mixed with self-oppression. What am I to do but tear away when I'm boiling at the top? Try to find a way to fight the fires, mother rat from the mind's flyers. If all the shots you bow your heads, the marching never stops. The stars could be free, but this insanity bends you right by the knee. Running in circles now for something that can't be found. Out of breath, you hit the wall, the rain starts to fall. You run away, sing a tune that's true, I'll be beside you. Make you stay. Cut the strings before your life starts to decay. From tears of blood, regrets of laughter, turn around and I'll be faster. Your hollow shape as the faith begins to drop. Shelter, confide, your thoughts of suicide is hanging down by the fray. Running in circles now for something that can't be found, and there's no time for today. You prayed away that the world would be untrue. I will rise again to you. You prayed away that the world would be untrue as it rose against you. Yeah. Lights all here, but if you try, the pain unveils through genocide. Until we're gone, nothing can matter at all. When you're gone, nothing can matter at all.